Call our first budget hearing, September 8, 2021, to order. We're going to have Commissioner Smith give us the pledge and invocation.
Our Father, we come once again to say thank you for realizing, Lord, you've been good to us and you've blessed us. So we come to say thank you. As we come down on this hour to partake of this budget hearing, we ask of him, Father, you continue to lead us, guide us, direct us in the way that you have us to go, that all that we shall say and do will be pleasing and acceptable to your sight, that it be useful, Heavenly Father, for this community. Help us, God, to be good stewards of what you have put us in charge of. These blessings we ask in thy Son, Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Edward, are you ready to go?
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. So this is the first of two hearings that we are required to have by state statute. We have to have these meetings after 5 o'clock. That's why we are here this evening. So the PowerPoint this year is a little lengthy. It's a little longer. I wanted to make sure for the public's view as well that I cover as much as possible. And I want to do it kind of quickly, but I want to take time to go through and show where significant changes are from last year to this year, and significant things that are in the budget. And as we go through some of the items that we have from grant standpoints and things of that nature. So the agenda for this evening is, I want to talk about again, a lot of this is I want for the public. It's good for the public so they have the information for those viewers that we have that are at home. But we have the agenda will go through the budget process and the calendar on how we move through this, the proposed budget. We'll talk about budget highlights. We'll talk about infrastructure improvements. There are a lot of infrastructure improvements in this budget, a lot of capital. The biggest increase in this budget is due to infrastructure improvements, whether it be road, capital projects, and water and sewer, a lot of water and sewer projects. Major capital items, we'll talk about those. Grant applications outstanding. If you recall, we've applied for lots of grants, so I want to highlight some of those grants that we're still waiting to hear from, we have not heard from, and I want you to be aware of those because they are part of this budget process as well. Substantial items that we excluded in FY21. If you recall, there were several items in the 21 budget that we deferred or we did not include in our budget for the current fiscal year that we're in. And so I wanted to kind of go through and highlight those. Then I'm going to do an overview. Last year we did an overview citywide. This year I've added the general fund into that overview because that's where the significant changes that's where we have some significant changes that I want to be able to highlight those general fund changes. And then we'll follow up with questions, comments, and direction from the City Council. So the budget calendar is called the TRIM process. That's the Florida statute that all governments have to follow when setting their budgets. Typically, we begin in March and April when we start the budget process. That's when we sit down with the departments where they put together and draft their budgets. The estimated taxable values come from the property appraiser on June 1st. And then we have meetings after that. We continue to have meetings with the departments. On July 1st, the property appraiser is required to certify the taxable values to each municipality. We currently have this phase of public workshops were held on the 19th, July 19th, 20th, and 21st here at the City Council, in the City Council chambers. We set, if you recall, on July 21st, we set a proposed budget. You set a proposed budget and a millage rate on July 21st. Those rates that you set on July 21st are the rates that were mailed to each of the property owners in their proposed property tax bills. So tonight is the first of two public hearings. We will have to hold one more public hearing by law, And that meeting is scheduled for the final millage rate and budget is set for next Wednesday, September the 15th at 6 o'clock here at the City Hall Council Chambers. And then our new fiscal year will begin on October 1, 2021, which represents your fiscal year FY22. So some of the highlights in the budget that you have tonight, the current millage rate in the budget, the current budget is balanced at a millage rate of 4.1876 per $1,000 of assessed value. This is a decrease of 1/10 of a mil, which equates to about $400,000. The city tax base has increased $397 million, providing an additional $1.1 million in ad valorem tax revenues. The utility tax rate, if you recall, was changed the current fiscal year that we're in with an effective date of July 1, that these rates would go into effect. If you recall, we had a cap on our utility service tax rates. We were not allowed to have that cap by state law, so we made the adjustment to those rates to be in compliance with state statutes. That change generated an additional $1.1 million in the current fiscal year 22 budget. Keep in mind here as well, that took effect on July 1. So with that being said, we're going to have July, August, and September. You're going to have 3 months of this new rate currently, as we currently sit. These new rates are in effect for our customers, our citizens, our customers. So it's going to generate about a little more than $300,000 in additional revenue in this current fiscal year that you're in. The general fund currently is balanced using a little less than $1.4 million of the reserves. Keep in mind the reserves at fiscal year 20 were at 31.7% is where they were sitting. We used a little less than $1 million in reserve to balance the 21 budget. We're using about 1.4 to balance this budget of those reserves. And with that being said, when those numbers are, if we hit those targets, our reserves will be between 22 and 25%. This budget has 16 new positions, and I'll highlight those as we move through, and 1 eliminated position. The budget includes a performance-based merit program of up to 6%. That is included, if you recall, last year we went down to 3% due to all the COVID pandemic and the economic issues that we had. We were able to build in up to 3% in this current fiscal year. So the up to 6% will be included in the new fiscal year. Our property casualty workers' comp insurance have increased approximately 11%. Our health insurance saw an increase of 6.4%. This is pretty good compared to some of the other neighboring jurisdictions. We've heard they're double digits. So this is some good news for us. This budget does include Camp Weewa. You will see it's its own budget. It's a separate budget in here, its own cost center. And as we move through, I will highlight some of those points as well. But the full Camp Weewa is included in this budget. Some of the other highlights, there are significant street improvements. We'll talk about those as we go through. There are new traffic signals, several, 5 to be, I think is where we are. And we'll highlight those as we move through. There are new sidewalks proposed. As you know, we have a new school coming in. So there is some funding for new sidewalks. Sidewalk repair, there's money for, more money allocated for sidewalk repairs. Contract mowing, we're continuing our successful contract mowing program. That continues in this budget. The speed hump program, it is funded, so it'll be there for FY22 as well. There's money for lighting improvements. If you recall from the proposed budget workshops, we put an additional $400,000 so that we could do some bigger street lighting improvements, and we'll be bringing those back to the City Council when we have all of that information. Street sweeping is included in this budget, so we're continuing that program. And then there are some stormwater improvements that we'll talk about as well. Some of the significant dollars that you see, big dollar items, infrastructure improvements, are your water, wastewater, and reclaimed water infrastructure improvements. Lots of improvements happening up in the Kelly Park area. a lot of growth in that area, and so there's a lot of improvements happening up in that area. If you recall we talked about this in the workshops and in the proposed budget hearing, that the garbage rate will see a 3% increase for residential and a 3% increase for commercial, keeping up with growth and keeping up with our sanitation fund. So those 16 positions and eliminated positions are broken down here. You can see there are 2 communication technician positions added to this budget. There's a code enforcement officer included, another code enforcement officer included in this budget. There's a records clerk for the city clerk area in this budget. There's a multi-code inspector and a permit clerk. Those are being added to the building department. Sanitation equipment operator. If you recall from the sanitation workshops, he was requesting, Josh was requesting another sanitation worker to keep up with our growth. There's an electrician included for our facilities department. The next 3 positions are related to Camp Weewa. So if you recall, when Brian did his presentation, he noted that he would need 3 positions to work with Camp Weewa. So you're going to have a Camp Weewa manager position that's in here and funded. You have an outdoor recreation specialist. You have a maintenance worker 2. Those 3 positions are all funded and will work at Camp Weewa. There are 2 recreation leaders included in here. There are 3 parks workers. The parks workers, if you recall, we did away with our inmate program. As Brian presented in his presentation, we did away with the inmate program, so we are putting 3 parks workers to keep up with parks and recreation. And then the only eliminated position was there was an accounting specialist position that was eliminated. So in total, you have 16 new positions, 1 eliminated position, a total of 15 new positions in this current fiscal year 22 budget. Some of the significant infrastructure improvements, one of the biggest ones is the Harmon Road construction and traffic signal. This is a $4 million project, and it is budgeted through your traffic impact fees. Kelly Park Road and Jason Dwelly Parkway, the new traffic signal. As you know, we've been designing all of these traffic signals that you see coming before you now. This is now the construction phase. So these are wrapping up design, and they will be bid for construction in fiscal year 22. You have one at Vic and Lester. You have another one at Errol and 441. And I don't know if you've noticed or not, but the big billboard at Errol and 441 has come down. So, prepare for this intersection improvement. And then 441 and Bradshaw will also have a new traffic signal improvement. Road resurfacing, this is a big one. We've been hearing this one for a while. This one we have taken some money, if you recall, from the Rescue Act. We took an additional $1 million and put into this program. And if you recall, we had, if you recall, we had a road assessment study done, and that's wrapping up. They're supposed to be completed, I think, by the end of September. So that study will come back to you to prioritize the road resurfacing program, and you'll get to see that. But we did put an additional $1 million in here, so that gives us $1.8 million in road resurfacing money. This is one of the biggest amounts we've ever had in road resurfacing over the years. New sidewalk funding, I talked about that. There's dollars in here for new sidewalks. As you know, we have the new school coming in on Jason Dwelly, Appy Lane, that we're going to have sidewalk issues that we're going to have to take care of. Stormwater and pipelining funding, every year we have money in here. So if we have to do any rehab to any stormwater, drainage issues, or pipelining, we have those dollars budgeted. There's money in here for a South Road extension at Northwest Recreation Complex. This is coming from your recreation impact fees. If you recall, in some of the reviews that we've had or the studies we've had, there was talk about putting a road, another road coming out just behind the school to be able to get traffic out of the park with another access. So that was in our plans, and that is being funded through the Recreation Impact Fee Fund. The Grossenbacher Water Plant well replacement and rehabilitation, we have to go deeper, as you've heard from Public Services. on our wells. And so this is major projects, it's a compliance thing, lots of dollars, but this is to go deeper on those wells and rehab those wells. Plymouth Regional Water Plant well upgrade. There's money in here for upgrades. West Kelly Park Road 16-inch water main. Golden Gem 16-inch water main. Effie Drive 16-inch water main. And US 441 16-inch water main. So these are big improvements in that area, but that's where we have a lot of growth. We have a lot of developments that are coming in, and so these are the infrastructure that we have to get in place for those, to be ready for those. Lift station upgrades, there's money in here to do our lift stations. So you'll be able to, you'll see that. West Kelly Park Road, 12-inch sewer main. You saw the water mains, now you're seeing the sewer mains for those areas. Golden Gem Road, sewer main, 12-inch sewer main. You have Golden Gem Reclaimed Water Treatment Plant. As you know, our water treatment plant that we are partnering with St. John's, we have the storage facility. Now we'll begin the actual treatment plant. And then on Golden Gem, you also have a 30-inch reclaimed water main. Plymouth Serena Road, you have a 16-inch reclaimed water main. You have West Kelly Park Road, 16-inch water main, reclaimed water main, and Effie Drive. So you will see you have the water, the sewer, and the reclaim lines all going into that area, on the Kelly Park area, to prepare for and make sure that we are ready for these developments that are coming. Some major capital items that are in this budget. Fire Station 6 is fully funded in this budget. It is funded, as you know, we have money from the legislature. We got 50% from the legislature, and then we're using the other 50% of our fire impact fees. So we were able to get the 50% funding from the state, which was a great thing. And then for fire, there's a fire engine, a new fire engine 11, if you recall. It needed to be replaced. The fire department did a really good job and got it through another year. But it's time to replace that one, so that's in this budget. Keep in mind that also, as we talked about in the proposed budget, $300,000 of this $600,000, almost $700,000 purchase is coming from the monies that we received from Duke Energy. If you recall, we earmarked $300,000 for this particular item. There's a replacement ambulance. We've been doing an ambulance now every year, new ambulance. That's in this budget. Brush truck pump replacement. They are also, some more of those brush truck pumps are included in this budget. 21 police vehicles. If you recall, a couple years, 2 or 3 years ago, we decided that we would make sure that we were funding our vehicles, our ambulance, our vehicles, through our budget instead of from debt service. So there are 21 police vehicles. 10 of those police vehicles are related to the 10 officers that we've applied for. So the budget includes the vehicle and the outfitting in this budget for the 10 officers that we're hoping we'll get with the COPS grant. There's also a new dispatch console. Dispatch has requested a console with growth, the growth of the city. They've asked for a console. Motorola system upgrade. This is the recording of our radio system. This is included in the budget. There are numerous desktops, laptops, a lot of laptops for police and fire replacement. AC unit replacement, there's lots of funding. The facilities budget in this year, the facilities budget has a lot of, has seen an increase, a big increase to make improvements to our facilities. There's a city hall parking lot resurfacing is funded in here. There's various building and ADA improvements. There's funding for various building improvements. So from fire sprinklers, fire alarms, there's funding for all of our facilities in the facilities for our buildings and our ADA compliance issues for next year. There is field lighting. If you recall from the proposed budget, there are 2 major projects. One of the things we saw through our surveys and our that we did at Recreation was field lighting was a big one. People, they wanted more field lighting for some of those fields. So there are 2 significant field lighting projects. There's a playground for Camp Weewa. that's included in this budget. Brian had that in his presentation as well. There's field equipment and mowers. As you know, every year we have field equipment and mowers that we replace, but we're adding some new positions. So we'll have some new mowers. Vehicle replacements, as you saw from each one of the departments in the workshops, we're replacing vehicles based on those departments who evaluated their vehicles and decided that it was time to retire those vehicles. There is a tractor that has an arm on it for stormwater so that we can mow those areas that we can't get our mowers into because they're wet or the inclines. The Stormwater Division has asked for this purchase, and so this will give us a tractor that will allow us to mow those areas that we can't get a regular mower into. And then there's an automated side load garbage truck purchase included in this year. So those are the major capital items that are included in the budget. The grant applications that are outstanding, as you know, we've applied for these. It's been a little time back. We're starting to hear, some agencies are starting to hear back. We are hoping we will hear back real soon. But I think it's important to highlight that these items are not in the budget, but we have applied for these items. And one of the reasons our reserves are where they are is we've got reserves. If for some reason comes back and we have to provide a match for some of these, some of them do require, some of them don't. But if it comes back, for example, say we get the fume event system for the fire stations, but we don't get the safety educational trailer, and we want to fund that, we can go to our reserves to fund that item. Because keep in mind, you can't fund these items. If you fund these items ahead of being awarded the grant, it could affect your grant award. So we've applied for 10 new police officer positions. We've applied for the police officer body cameras. If you recall, that was in your meeting this afternoon, to apply for those. There are 6 firefighter positions in this budget that we've applied for that we're hoping we will get. There's a fume event system for 5 of the fire stations. This is one that we really want. This is, this is a good thing for our fire department. And so this is one we're really hoping that we get. You might ask why Station 6 isn't listed. Station 6 will have this built into its construction when it's built. And then there's a fire safety educational trailer. If you recall, the chief was talking about how this could be used with other jurisdictions from an educational standpoint on fire safety. So what did we exclude in 21? I think it's important. I always believe that it's important to go back and look, what couldn't we do in the current year that we're in? Well, we didn't fund Fire Station 6 last year. We funded it this year because we were trying to get monies, grant monies, state monies, and we were successful and were able to get 50% of that station funded through state dollars. There was a fire district chief that was asked for last year. If you recall, those 6 positions that the chief presented, he's asking for 3 new district chiefs in that grant. Police officers, we did not fund police officers last year, but we are applying for the 10 police officers this year. The audio video city council chamber, for the city council chambers, you've already funded that. It's already going. Actually, we've already, I think, signed the contract, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm almost sure that that's there. So computer servers, I talked to Rob today in IT. That's all taken care of. He was able to use savings from the current year to get the servers that he needed. Additional fields for Northwest Recreation Complex. As you know, this is a significant expenditure, but this is one that we, when we did our survey for a recreation component for our citizens, this was an item that was in part of that survey, and as you know, the consultant is doing that, putting that together now. So this is an item that will be a future item. The amphitheater bathrooms was an issue that we didn't fund in 21. As you know, we did. Currently, we have funded that with the Duke Energy monies as well. Storage building for Recreation and Cemetery Division. As you know, we use those Duke Energy money to fund that as well. So that's funded. New building for Fleet and Streets Division. This is going to be a significant purchase. If you recall, during the budget workshop, we talked about we've got to have design. We've got to have a design of a study of what we need what do our departments need from fleet to facilities to streets? What all do they need? What meets their needs for future so that we can make these improvements that will be good into the future. So what we've done, the budget, the FY22 budget includes funding, if you recall, to do the design. And one of the items we talked about was doing design for the fleet and streets division building. We've talked about, there was some money set aside, the Duke Energy money set aside for the Conley building. So we have to do design on that. We have to have some kind of a design there. And then we had also talked about the museum, that we would need to do a design. Before you can build anything, you need to have a design. So there's dollars in the budget to do those designs for these buildings, for these future buildings. The fiber replacement, City Hall fiber and Public Services fiber replacement, we didn't do that last year. It's not in the current budget. We are looking at grants, trying to find grants. They seem to think there's good grant opportunity for fiber for fiber replacement and things of that nature. So we're hoping that this will be a good grant opportunity. Street resurfacing, if you remember last year, we didn't have a lot to put into street resurfacing. This year, we're putting in $1.8 million. And then border lake flooding. That was an issue that, if you recall, we earmarked part of the Duke Energy monies, $250,000 for that. We are, and I'll go ahead and I'll say that now, I was gonna kind of save it, but we are applying for 3 major grants. They are no matching grants, so that's a good thing from our standpoint. Border Lake is one of them. There's one of the grants that we're gonna apply is to try to get a line from Border Lake down to our treatment facility on Cleveland and actually build a facility as well to treat the water that we take off of Border Lake. And that's about $5 million, so we're applying for that.
Well, and it also will pick up excess water from Lake Page and Lake Pleasant. So that whole area, we have had a lot of flooding, we can take all that water, treat it, put it in a reclaimed pond. So that's, we'd love to be able to get that done.
Also, on that grant, we've applied for 3 major grants. One of them is to redo the lift station at Fran Carlton. That is one of our older lift stations. And so we've asked for that lift station. We put that into the grant, as well as the line replacement from that lift station all the way down to Cleveland. That's one of our oldest lines. And then we've also asked for some grants for the galvanized pipes and the asbestos pipes to be able to replace those as well. And so all of that together is about $10 million worth of grant opportunity with no match. So we're hoping that we'll be able to land some of those grants as well.
Let me just ask you, who's doing the grants? That's a lot of grants. Who's preparing all those grants?
Well,
It's a team effort.
It's a team effort, right? Public Services is working on it because they have to provide the data, they have to provide, all the engineering specs and everything like that. And then we have, Dr. Jackson works in our grants area, so she will be helping us put together to file for the grants. So it's kind of a team effort. It requires because you've got to have the engineers to put all the stuff together and design, kind of give that rough design. One of them required a 1,500 page explanation, 1,500 word explanation, on the project. So you got to have the writer, and then we got to have the technical people. So it's a team effort. Those are working together to apply for those grants.
When we get to them, if you could just let me know, what is the deadline for all those grants to be submitted?
Those 3 is September. It's like next week from Monday.
I think it was, the 17th.
Yeah.
Don't quote me,
So
but I
it's-
think it was September the 17th, right in that area. So those we had to get off quickly. And again, those are 0 match, so hopefully it would be nice to land some of those grants.
And when do they start awarding them?
I don't know, Commissioner. We can get you that information. I'm sure there's a timeline that says when they award those. But the good thing about it is they met the definitions. Those are the kinds of projects that they want, in that it's a mitigation grant, and those are the kinds of projects that it met the definition. So hopefully, fingers crossed, it'd be nice to get some of those big infrastructure improvement grants. So now the next section is the budget overview. So the next section that you will see, this is the budget for the citywide. So this is all funds included in this budget. It's tight. I know it's kind of small to see the numbers. It's hard to get them all on there, but that's why you have it. You have it on your iPads as well, so that you can see it. So I want to go through these. and kind of highlight some of the significant changes. So property taxes, as you can see, are up 8%, based on the millage rate of the 4.1876. The other taxes, as you know, you see a significant increase there, 23%. This is the municipal service tax. This is the additional $1.1 million that will be coming in through the electric bills, the water bills, and the gas bills. Permits, fees, and special assessments, this number is up 10%. A lot of this is due to building activity, building permit fees, electric permit fees, building permit fees. Intergovernmental revenue, this is your sales tax. You can see it's only up about $900,000 total. That's not, usually this number is a little bit more significant, but you can see it's up $900,000 or 8%. Charges for services, you see an 8%, almost 9% increase there. These are the water rates, the WEWA, the Camp WEWA rates are in here. So that's what their charges for services are. Fines and forfeitures are relatively flat.
Well, let's go back to the charge for services. I just wanted to bring this to your attention. You remember it's been 6 months ago or 9 months ago, we had the water company come in to do the initial looking at trying to find water and wastewater that we weren't getting revenue from. And I think we're now up to about 600,000 in revenue that we weren't collecting.
Right, they are still digging and still going through that. So there are some changes. There are some of these revenues include some of that, but when they finish going through that, you'll be getting a whole report of that as well. So they our city's so spread out, as you know, they've been from one end to the other. So they've really been working and digging around. COVID set them back a little bit because their employees out in the field. They had issues with some of their employees, but they continue to work on that, which has been very good for us. The fines and forfeitures, you can see that's relatively flat. The impact fees, you can see impact fees are up 32%. That is huge. That is your traffic impact fees, your water sewer impact fees are mainly why you have such a significant increase there. Because with the development, as you know, the impact fees are a lot higher as the developments are approved. I also want to point out here too, we are having the water rates and the impact fees are both being reviewed now. They will come back to you before the holidays, we're hoping. With COVID, everything has been delayed. I know we say that over and over and over, but it just, we've had delays in that as well. But you should be seeing that really, really soon. Interest income or investment income, it's down a little bit. As you know, rates are, you know what the economy's at, and the rates are very, very low. Miscellaneous revenue is down. There were some miscellaneous revenues that we had from FY21 that didn't quite meet our projections, so we've had to make a few adjustments there when it comes to those revenues. Transfers are up 15%. This is mainly due to, the biggest one here is we're transferring $1 million from the rescue money, which went into the grant fund because we wanted to make sure we kept those dollars separate. $1 million is being transferred from that into the streets fund for the resurfacing program. Grants, you have $3 million in grants. These, $1 million of this, or $1,014,000 of this is for Fire Station 6. And then the other $2 million is the 50% cost share that we have with St. John's Water Management District for some of the infrastructure projects on the Golden Gem plant and the lines out there. And then the reserves, you might say, oh my gosh, we went from 14 to 27% of the reserves. Well, you saw the reserves in the general fund are about 1.4 million that we're using, but the additional reserve here is mainly your impact fee funds. And that's very common across organizations because you collect a lot of those impact fee funds today to build that infrastructure. You can't build all that infrastructure in the same year that you collect it. So we've collected these impact fees for developments, and now we will apply it to those projects from transportation, water, wastewater. So-
Have we always labeled it that way?
As reserves?
Yeah, reserves screams like a cash balance versus a revenue stream. It's more intuitive if you say impact fees.
You could, but it's reserved because when you look at the fund by itself, you have impact fees that you're collecting for the current year, and then you have to use the reserve because it went into, when the year closed out, it went into the reserves. So it's a reserve, it has to come from the reserve balance so that you don't double count the impact fees for year to year. So what you'll see when you look in the impact fee fund, you'll see the impact fees for the current year collected, which is that number, that impact fee, that 10 million you see in impact fees there, that's actual impact fees that are going to be collected in the current fiscal year. But the part of the 27 reserve is actually impact fees that were collected in prior years. And when you look at each fund separately, the water fund, or the water impact fee fund, the police impact fee fund, the fire impact fee fund, you'll see that actual reserve amount that we're using from those funds. So with that being said, the citywide summary of revenues is just a little over $130 million. Or 23% increase from the prior year. If you recall, last year our budget was 105, almost $106 million. And again, that significant increase is due to a lot of infrastructure, capital projects and infrastructure projects that we are doing, that we have budgeted for FY22. So on the bottom section, you will actually see by fund. So you can see the general fund is $58.5 million, or 11.6% increase from the prior year. The streets improvement fund is 48% increase. Again, a lot of that is due because we are putting money into there. We are putting money in there for street resurfacing, so transferring $1 million into that fund. Traffic impact fee fund went from 3.8 million to 5.6 million. Again, you saw all those traffic lights, Harmon Road extension, those are very big capital projects, and so that's why you have that. I'm sorry, it's 7.4 or 2.4 to 7.5. That's a big increase, and that's due to those traffic improvements. The law enforcement trust fund, federal, state, and the police discretionary fund, they pretty much are this. We budget a number here, but again, a lot of these dollars have to. If they have to come back to you if they spend stuff out of these funds. So this is just to budget those, put dollars in those funds, but they have to come back to you to approve it, to spend anything out of these funds. Fire impact fee and police impact, recreation impact fee. You can see that number, that is up a big percentage. We're collecting more recreation impact fees with development. Fire impact fee and police impact fee. The fire is up significant from $255,000 to $2 million. That's because we're funding the fire station in that fund this year. Stormwater, the stormwater fund is down a little bit. I want to stop in a moment for this fund, because this is a fund also where we've had some issues that, as you know, we have a study ongoing, and they're putting together, the consultant's putting together a workshop to come back and present all of that to you. But one of the things we did in this fund this year that we felt we needed to do is put people in this fund. We didn't have any people in this fund. Or any positions. We had positions in the utility fund that would help out and do, stormwater restoration or whatever. But getting prepared for the future in this fund, to be able to do the maintenance and the improvements on the stormwater system, we're going to have positions in this fund. So what we've done in this year, in this budget, what you'll see is we've taken those two positions from the utility fund and put them into the stormwater fund, so that we have two people dedicated to doing maintenance, repair and maintenance on stormwater cleaning. We've used them now, but we've got to get them into the right fund so that they can be dedicated to that stormwater fund, because that's an area where we need to make improvement, and we know we need to make improvements on that. So the study will come back. I don't know what the study will come back at. I will tell you, I think it's going to come back in more than two people. I think it's going to take more than two people to work in our stormwater fund. But again, they will bring that back to you with that study on how to keep up in compliance with our stormwater. I will say, though, that Public Service has done a really good job. They've really done a lot of work with the two guys And then Richard Earp, our engineer, has done really good working with our MS4 permit, getting it compliant, keeping all of it up to date. They've done a really good job with that, and they've done a lot of inspections this current year that we weren't doing.
Quick question on why do you have your police impact fee as a flat year over year?
Commissioner, since we haven't spent any of those dollars, we've maintained that revenue number. It's been a little more than that, but that money's been going into reserves anyway, so whatever dollars coming in, we haven't earmarked any projects for that fund yet. We're holding that for future, like with fire, we're using those dollars for a future station. So we could budget that higher, it's just gonna go into the reserves anyway, so we've
But,
kind of
I mean,
kept
But
that.
on this page, you're just trying to articulate the top line revenue that you're getting from police impact fees. So if I look at actuals for fiscal year '20, I'm sitting at 764K, and yet we're only gonna say that we're gonna get 255
Right.
in '22. Why is such a steep reduction in revenue?
Well, we have not changed this number. If you look, this number's been like this for several years.
I know,
It
and
was
I'm always
before.
confused by that.
And we could increase that and inflate that. I mean, we could increase that number. We could budget that number to, I don't know, closer to $700,000. It goes into the reserve anyway until you guys decide which project you want to spend it on. So because there's no expenditure side to that, it all just goes into the reserves anyway.
The point being made is, this is our citywide, what we're budgeting that we're expecting to see as a revenue intake. Regardless of what we do with the money,
Right.
this is what we feel is gonna come into us. If anything, it should be flat against 20 versus flat to say, all right, we're just gonna allocate 255 year over year over year, because that's not reality. Reality is gonna dictate that development is increasing, so our impact fee should steadily increase.
And we could do that, you're right. So we could look at see what that number will be, and we could increase that number, and then it would change the revenue side. It won't touch the expenditure side, but we could
Right.
put it on the revenue side. So no, you're correct. We could do that so that you can see that number. The grant fund, a big jump in the grant fund, but like I talked about, that's the $1 million that we put in the grant. We put all of the rescue money in there so we could keep track of it, and now we're transferring $1 million of it out. Special assessment fund, it went from $63,000 to $174,000, almost $175,000. Martin's Place, if you remember the retention pond, we now have the special assessment that we set to pay back the stormwater fund for the improvements that we made to their retention pond. So they're paying that back over time. If you recall, you approved that assessment. And then the street lighting fund is also a special assessment fund in here. And those, as you approve those street lighting agreements, they will be part of this fund. Community redevelopment, this fund, if you recall, this number, $3,266,270, that's the exact amount that the CRA approved. So it's just being put over into the city budget, but it was all adopted based on the CRA. The utility operations is, you see a 15% increase. This is an increase in revenues related to growth. Some of those additional revenues that we received from Water Office of America have given us some increases in some of these lines. So most of this increase is growth because, again, as you know, there's no rate increase for the utility customers. We're waiting for that study to come back to see where these rates line up with our expenditure side. The utility impact fee fund, $13 million to $17 million, additional $4 million. And again, this is for all of those water lines you saw, the treatment plant. The airport is zero. Hopefully, we hope to close on the airport. We were hoping we would close this week. We're still hoping, but everything, all the documents have been, the attorneys have looked at all the documents, everybody's good with the documents, you guys approved the contract, so hopefully we will close real soon. So you will see no budget for the airport fund. And then the sanitation fund is up 1.5%. This increase is mainly due to, we added a position, he added a position to his budget. He's got a vehicle in his budget, so, and this budget does include a 3% increase in revenue for residential and commercial rates. So what does that look like overall? If I look at my revenues overall, it shows that property tax represent a little over 13% of the funding. Charges for services represent almost 25%. Intergovernmental revenues, which are a lot of those are your state sales tax, that represents almost a little more than 9%. Transfers, 7%. So impact fees, 7 3/4, and then so on and so forth. You can see that 20% is a reserve number. Again, that's mainly coming out of infrastructure. So from each fund, the general fund of this is total city now, you're looking at the total city, $130 million. The general fund represents almost 45% of the city's budget. The streets improvement fund represents a little more than 4%. Utility impact fee fund is 13.5%. Utility operations, which is the water, sewer, and reclaimed water fund, represents a little more than 20%. So you can see and all of this other funds, smaller funds that make up the whole. So that was the revenue side. So on the expenditure side, you will see that personnel services are up 6.5%. Again, this is due to the 6%, up to 6% performance pay is back in the budget. The health insurance is part of this budget line, 6.4%. The new positions are part of this number as well. The operating expenses are up 14% from the year before. Again, the big piece of this is also Camp Weewa, so it's part of these. It is part of these numbers. Debt service is down. So you can see that we haven't issued any new debt, and we've really reduced the debt service. I think we've reduced it about 65% from 2018. And the overall debt service, yearly debt service, has been reduced by about $1.4 million per year. Again, keep in mind, as we set ourselves we're looking in the horizon, we're looking out to the public safety complex that we're looking at. We're doing the study now, that'll set ourselves up so that we can issue debt for that. Also, any improvements at Northwest Recreation, those are costly improvements. As you know, fields and all of that are very costly. This will put us in good shape for future debt service. Capital outlay up big time, 90%. Like I said, this budget is very infrastructure capital improvement intensive. As you saw as we went through those slides, there are lots of infrastructure improvements, big infrastructure improvements. Contributions are down, so I kind of want to explain that so you would kind of have an idea what that is. If you recall, when we had the agreements for the Martin Road improvements, roundabout improvements, and then we had the city center improvements at the 436, 441, that contract was, we had to make all the improvements, whether they were FDOT's improvements or city's improvements. As you know, McGee is our road, so we were able to capitalize the money, the dollars that we spent of our impact fees for that portion, but we had to do contributions for the other portion because we had to contribute those dollars to FDOT because it's their road. We made the improvements and stuff, but it's their asset, it's their road. So that's why you might ask, why is there a contribution, but there hasn't been any other years. Transfers, it was 8.2 to 9.5. Again, a big piece of this is related to, we're transferring $1 million. So a lot of transfers that we're moving into other funds, and the biggest one, of course, is the road resurfacing. And then contingency, the $220,000, this is money we're putting back into the reserves. So Commissioner Becker, to your point on the police, if we increase that police revenue to maybe get a little closer to what we think the estimate might be, we'll increase this line too to put it in contingency so it'll be in reserves for future projects.
Yeah, and while you're looking at that, because the fire impact fee, the $2.033 million, that includes the state funding and our match. Is that correct?
Yes.
So if you back that out and normalize what it would be irrespective of that, then it would only be $33K. So that seems off. So that number I feel needs to be higher as well.
Yeah, if you raise that number, then you'll use that. You can use the impact fees for that. All right, so there again, you can see a little over $130 million. So now we'll look at it from a citywide function purpose. This is a lot of times kind of explains where the money, where the services are actually going. You can see that general government is 7.9 million, almost flat compared to the prior year. And again, your general government services are the mayor, commissioner's office, their finance, your HR, those are your general services, IT. Then community development, that is actually building, community development and building. You can see that it's up a little bit, 8%. Again, remember we added 2 positions in the building department. Transportation is up 131%. This is because we are doing those big road projects. You have the big Harmon Road project and all those traffic lights. Public safety is up 17%, 31 million to almost 37 million. Again, those are a lot of capital. You have the fire engine, you have the ambulance, and then you have the police vehicles for the police, the ongoing current police officers, and then the ones that we've applied for in the grant. The public services, that budget is up 38%. That is, again, facilities. As you can see, we're putting a lot of dollars into the facilities for building and facility upgrades and facility improvements. So culture and recreation, this is your recreation department, 5.4, 33% increase, 7.2. $1 million of this is Camp Weewa. So that's where a big portion of this, and then of course the other portion, big portion is the lights out at the Northwest Fields. Stormwater, not a very big increase. It's kind of maintaining like it was last year. Again, keep in mind, this does now include 2 people in this fund. For the first time, we've actually had people in this fund. Community redevelopment, this again is your CRA approved budget, so this is the CRA dollars of 3.2 million. The special assessment districts, 139,000. This pays for all of those special assessments that those homeowners are paying. The debt service and transfers, you can see it's pretty flat. And I want to stop here a second because we haven't changed any of the transfers. If you recall, for the last 3 budget cycles, and I've made it pretty clear, we haven't messed with any of those transfers. The audit, the consultant.
Edward, why don't you explain this so everybody realizes what you're talking about?
What that is. So what happens is your utility funds, your enterprise funds, I should say, which is your utility and your storm and your sanitation fund, they do not have their own HR, finance department. They use the ones that are paid for out of the general fund. They use the ones that we pay for, that are paid through the taxes general fund. So what you have is you do what they call, you have to do a transfer, an administrative transfer from those funds to the funds that provide that service. It happens to be the general fund in our case. So that is a pretty complicated process to do that because you've got to be able to match up. You have to have a good basis and a good reason to match up how much you're transferring out of one fund into the other. Because keep in mind, in your enterprise funds, you're setting rates based on what it really costs to provide water, garbage service to that citizen. And it's important because a lot of times we have a lot of citizens that we provide water, sewer, and reclaimed water to that don't pay city taxes because they live in the county. So you got to be very careful. You want to make sure that those rates in that utility fund are reflective of what it really costs to provide service to those customers. And so that's why it's a very complicated issue. And so that's why we've asked the consultant, and they are doing this as part of their process, supposed to bring this back to you to show you this is what the transfer should be. Based on all the data that they've seen and looked at all of what it costs to provide the service, they will bring all that back to you and say, this is what that transfer will be. What will that number be? I don't know. Currently, it's about a little over $6 million coming out of the utility fund. Well, that's a big number when you look at, the utility system of 32 million. 6 million is a big number. And it may be right. It may be low. We won't know. When they bring that back is when we'll be able to see what that actual number should be. So we've kept that steady because normally what you would do in a transfer, and I'm hoping they're going to bring this back, and I think they will, you bring that back and it has an inflation factor each year. So, because those services on the general fund side are increasing every year for personnel services, insurance, whatever. So that number should increase every year as well. So we haven't done that because we kind of want to make sure that that number's the right number.
Well, in the years before, they'd increased it $1 million one year and an additional $1 million the second year, so.
Right, so we're trying to find out.
Right.
See, and we don't have a lot of information on that, so, but you can go back and look in the years, and you'll see that. I'm sure they'll bring you that. You'll see where, for a couple years, it actually jumped up at $1 million, and each one of those years, and we don't know where, there may be a reason, I don't know. We don't see that, but that's why we need the consultant to tell us what that number should be. So,
So we know the actual cost for utilities. We know how much it costs per gallon of water used, reclaim versus potable. We know, how much it costs to pick up garbage. And that's the easy part of that equation.
right,
So what you're trying to solve for is the allocation expense over to the shared services on the general fund side. So
Right.
how much does it take finance to do some of the work that it takes to do all the math behind all
Exactly.
that? How much does it cost, the receptionist to field calls by people that are, ticked off about their bill?
Right.
Things like that. Is
Right.
that what you're
Well,
saying?
Yeah, that's what they're gonna do.
Medical benefits, workers' comp benefits, all that.
Yeah, it'll be those pieces too. Usually what I've seen in the past, what they've done is they'll take that overall cost, so HR costs this, X number. They'll look at that and they'll say, okay, your HR is increasing by 6% every year. But, I don't know, I'm gonna say 60% of HR is public services because of the number of employees and what it takes for that, the amount of service that HR provides for those kinds of employees, turnover, all of that. They look at all those factors, and you're right, and then they set a number and say, okay, 40%, 60% of HR should be allocated to your utility side.
Right, because one shared service should be able to get to an allocation expense back over, they should be able to charge an allocation to that department.
Right,
And what that allocation, when all that adds up, and then you just use your number of clients as your denominator, that should give you a loose indication of what your average cost per utility customer is.
Right.
Regardless of whether or not they're a tax-paying client or not, it's just the raw expense per that customer.
right.
Right, okay.
Yeah, and so this will be, and so that's why we've asked them, as part of this process, to put that together. Because keep in mind, when they do rate studies too for your utilities, you gotta, the debt service is exactly the same way as well. Part of the debt service can be paid with impact fees because it's a capacity, it's increasing capacity. Part of it's not, because part of it's you've redone a plant that's related to operating. Current customers are using that plant, have used that plant, therefore they are responsible for. So this study, we've asked them to do all of these things so that we've got a nice allocation of how all of these, because you're right, Commissioner, we know the easy expenses are, we know the salaries, we know all the operating that cost in that function. It's these expenses that require a little more in-depth analysis so that you can explain how you're allocating them. And what they've done is, which is good about the consultant, is they will compare us to others. So we'll be able to see what other jurisdictions do for these types of allocations so that we'll have, options. And usually when that's set, you don't review it again for like 5 years because they'll tell you, this is the number, I don't know, it's 6 million. But each year you need to increase it by 6%, and then in 5 years we'll come back and review it and see if it's changed. Utility system, I talked about that. Let's see, airport, sanitation, I talked about that. And then, of course, I talked about the reserve. So as you can see, this budget is balanced at 130 million, a little over 130 million for fiscal year 22. This is all encompassing, this is everything. So on the expenditure side, from a picture standpoint, what does it look like? 38% of our budget, of our total city budget, goes to our personnel. 21% goes to the operating, 27, almost 28% is capital outlay. Debt service represents almost 5.5%. Contributions are no longer. And transfers represent about a little over 7% are transfers. So function. This one I think is the most interesting because this one shows you where the expenditures are actually going citywide. So you can see public safety of the total budget. Keep in mind, this is everything. When we look at general fund, it'll be a different number. But when you look at the citywide budget, 28% is going to public safety, 25% is going to the utility system. General government represents 6%, transportation represents 10%, recreation represents a little more than 5.5%. So that you can see where the actual dollars are going from the expenditure side or function. So general fund, this is the big operating fund. This is the main fund of the city that funds everything but your utility and your sanitation and then your street, your special revenue fund. So I want to just kind of go through here quickly, because we've had a few changes since the proposed budget. I told you I wanted to call those out for you. Property taxes are 7.3%, or there's that $1.1 million in additional revenue from the property tax value increase. The utility tax electric, I wanted you to see that, it was 3.2 million in 20. We budgeted 3.1. And then we're budgeting 4.4 in this current year, and that's the number that we're working with Duke Energy. That's the number that they feel like that we're going to be, plus a growth number, a little bit of a growth is added into there for the additional change, for the change in our utility service tax rate. And then local communication services tax, very interesting, and I want to point this out because I can tell you for the years that my career that I've been working in finance, this number has always been going down. And I got a little shocked because when they gave me this number and it was up 12%, I was like, I think you gave me the wrong number. Because we've seen telecommunication service tax numbers, the legislature has made a lot of adjustments to this over the years, but we've always seen this decline with streaming and everything that's coming on. So they don't have a big explanation. I think, kind of my opinion is I look at this and I don't think this is going to last, but I don't know, it could. With COVID and the way it's changed things, maybe more people can do things from home, therefore they'll have a bigger communications bill, and so therefore we receive a tax off of that bill as well. There's a tax on that bill, and so maybe this is, the future. I don't know, but I do want you to keep in mind that the legislature works on this number every year when they meet. So it's very critical that we watch this because this is a number they keep reducing. So overall, you can see the taxes are up almost 13%, from 21 million to almost 24 million. Big increase in this line item for this year's budget.
And again, point to be made on the property taxes. It's not necessarily to say 7.4% on any individual home owner perspective. It's just the aggregate.
Correct.
The aggregate revenue, similar to the utility. The utility was organic, inorganic growth. Same thing here.
Yes.
You have organic, inorganic growth commingled there, and the net effect, top
Right.
line, is the 7.38%.
Right. The only thing here is the maximum that you could receive as a residential customer with a homestead exemption is 3%. So does that mean everybody got 3%? No, some could get 2, some could get, but the maximum that someone could get is 3%.
Right.
On the commercial side, it's different, of course.
Sure.
I think it's got a 10% cap, so it can go up. Plus, Commissioner, in that number as well is new. Any new stuff that
Correct.
came on would drive that number too.
That's what, yeah, by inorganic, that's what I mean.
That's how you mean, that's what I
Yeah.
thought. Licenses and permits, you can see it's up 8%. Again, it's all building permits. This is one of those where you kind of throw a dart. You don't really know how many projects are going to get approved, how much, when the timing and everything. So that's an increase there. That number changes a lot because a lot of people prepay permit things, so it's kind of one that you have to watch. This is a critical one I think we need to watch. As you know from the 1:30 meeting, I talked about the sales tax number is still short of $500,000 based on the estimate they gave us last year, which is critical because we have to make that up somehow in our budget. But going forward into the new fiscal year, you can see that almost 200,000 in additional state revenue sharing number, and 600,000, or 500. I have it written on here. I have to. So you can see, I want to make sure I speak. So 560. So a little over 200 and 560. So you can see a little more than about $750,000, $760,000 more in the estimate that they gave us from the July meeting to this meeting. But it's a number that we have to continue to watch because this has affected COVID. The pandemic can affect this revenue number.
But the other thing is, we're not sure how the internet tax is going to affect that.
Yes, that's true too.
That could help us a little bit.
Could help. Which I think is good. I know the financial update we're doing every month, but I think it probably is a good idea to continue to do that so that we can see how this number's changing. Recreation program activity fees, this is up a big percentage, 218. Again, this is the revenue offset to the Camp Weewa budget. So $1 million of this increase is actual related to the funding Camp Weewa. Fines and forfeitures is very flat. Miscellaneous revenue, again, just interest income. It's not a big number, but tweak that number down a little bit based on rates. And then your non-operating revenues, so this is your transfers and reserves. You can see here that, like I said earlier, last year we used $926,000 of the reserves. This year, we're using about $1.4 million of the reserves to balance the budget. Again, we put money in those reserves over the last couple of years, so, and we've also, our staff's done a remarkable job holding up on things, trying to make sure, that we can see where we're gonna fall out with FY '20, FY '21, so that, we wouldn't have any other significant shortfalls. And so some of these dollars are dollars that are coming forward to finish some projects that we didn't do in that year. Funding from restricted reserve, this is a new number. You don't hardly see this very often because usually this item would come to you as a separate budget amendment. But if you recall from the July meeting, this number represents $400,000 that I told you we're using from some monies that we had earmarked from Duke Energy from our franchise agreement that had to be used for improvements to lighting or electrical things related to Duke. So we're taking $400,000 of those dollars and putting into the streets fund as part of the transfer to bring back some lighting improvements for you so that we could do some more significant lighting improvements. And then $100,000 of that is a storage retention fee. We collect $100,000 in storage retention fees, and that money is earmarked, so we're going to use those dollars for community development and building to do some of their storage retention. So overall, you can see the total revenue is $58.5 million, or almost 12% increase over the prior year, which was 52.4. From the expense side, legal and risk is down. It's a significant on the general government side. This is related to insurance. The funding that we had for insurance on our insurance program, we've actually had a little higher budget in prior years, so this is very good. So we've been able to have some savings here. And then information technology is up 11%. So if you recall when Rob did his presentation, he had some significant capital things that he was doing for some of the other departments, for public safety. And so this is where most of his increase comes from. Public safety side, you can see fire is up $1.3 million over the prior year, 13.9 to 15.2. The big pieces in this budget are, besides personnel increases and insurance increases, are the new fire engine and the new ambulance.
As we look at these going forward, I know parks and what am I thinking? Grounds and things like that. There's been some fluctuation in terms of what funds certain people are in, like fire suppression, EMS kind of fluctuated a little bit. Some of these other, are all of the previous year's actuals and previous year's budgets normalized to that movement? So if I'm looking at the column for 21, 22, and we're looking at year-over-year budget from last year or the actuals from the year before, is all that normalized like for like to reflect those movements?
No, they're not. The budgets are set from when you set them. So in this case, Commissioner, if you look, so if we go back here, these are the actuals that were spent in each one of those cost centers. This is the actual budget that was adopted for those cost centers, and then this is the new budget that's adopted. These numbers have not been touched. This is the original adopted budget.
Right.
So those numbers.
Case in point, so for funds that had material movements over the last 2 or say 3 years, the percent column, the percent variance really isn't as important, I guess.
Right.
Because if we're saying a 47% growth and that the first 2 columns are static and they don't reflect any changes that go between, let's say, suppression and EMS, then it, highlighting 47% becomes
right.
A
No,
little bit
you're exactly right. And
misleading.
I only do that because that way you can show where a big expenditure item went from one year to the next. But you're right. Overall, if you look at this, you are looking at the 9.3.
Okay.
So, and then from the police side, you can see this is 12.7. And again, the big significant piece of police on the police side are the 10 vehicles and the equipment for the 10 police officers that will be our share should we get those 10 officers. And then dispatch, you see it's up 214,000. That's pretty significant for that cost center, but that's the 2 positions. We've added 2 positions in there. So let me go back. So overall, you can see that if you look at public safety as a whole, it's up 11%, or $3.4 million of the total increase in general fund revenues. From community development, this is your planning and building department, or building division. It's up 188. The biggest increase here is building department because of the inspector that we've added for growth. We've added the inspector and the permit clerk. Recreation, Parks and Recreation, this is the one, Commissioner, this is when you're talking about where you started collapsing things. When you put things together, it does kind of, the percentages look a little off, but overall, you have to look at the bottom line, and you can look in recreation overall is almost 34% up. The biggest piece of that, though, $1 million of that is Camp Weewa. And then the other percentage of increase overall is the lights, which are about almost $400,000 for the lights that we're gonna do on the fields. So, but you can see Camp Weewa now has its own cost center, and so we'll be able to manage those costs. We'll be able to know what those are as we move forward. Debt service is down, as you can see, $679,000. Again, we're paying off some of the prior debt. Some of the vehicle debt that we had are starting to come off the books. If you recall, when we did the Duke Energy settlement, we had talked about paying off the recreation loan. It is in this number. So that was about $600,000. So it is included in this number because we're not going to use those dollars for this item. And then transfers are at 445. Again, this transfer is all to the streets fund. And if you recall, in your last budget in '21, you moved an additional $455,000 from the general fund. The property tax increase that we put in last year, that we left the rate, we took that additional 455 and put it into that streets fund because that's where you directed the staff to put it for ongoing mowing and things of that nature. You can see it's still in that fund. So it was $1 million last year. We're continuing to, it's an additional 400. And then, and a percentage, and I'll tell you why that is. But the 400 that I talked about earlier was transferring that restricted money from the general fund to the streets fund for street lighting. So that's why it's up 400,000. And then the 45,000 is, there is a percentage of the state revenue sharing dollars. When I talked about the intergovernmental revenues, there's that state sharing number that I told you went up about 200,000. A portion of that is required to go into maintaining streets. And so it's up by $45,000 over last year. So with that being said, you can see that the general fund is balanced at 58.5, a little more than $58.5 million, or 11, almost 12%, for a total of $6.1 million from one year to the next. So a very big increase in our general fund from last year to this year. And again, keep in mind, a lot of that, and I want to point this out, is the utility service tax. That increase of $1.1 million is just this year. I shouldn't say it that way. It will continue, and it should continue in future years. It won't be 1.1 every year. So I just want you to kind of keep that in mind. It'll be whatever the growth rate is for year to year. But this year's benefiting from an additional $1.1 million because of that number in that tax. So, all right. So from the general side, we'll look at the graphs on the general side. You can see taxes represent almost 41% of our budget comes from taxes. Licenses and permits, 12% come from licenses and permits. Intergovernmental revenues, almost 20%. That's your sales tax and revenues that come from other agencies, mainly the state. Charges for service are 7%. Again, these are the recreation fees, your ambulance transport fees. Fines and forfeitures is a small amount. Miscellaneous revenue is a very small amount. Transfer from other funds, that's the 12 million. And when we talked earlier about transfer from utility funds, you can see 12% of the revenue coming into this fund, which is more than $6 million, is coming from transfers from other funds. So it's a significant piece of the budget. But again, we provide services to those funds as well. And then transfer from restricted reserves, those are those reserve numbers that are assigned. They're not unassigned fund balance, but they're restricted and assigned, so we have to spend them where the laws and ordinances require us to spend them, so that's why they're there. And then transfer from reserves, you can see represents 2.4%. On the expenditure side, public safety is almost 59% of the budget. So finances represents 1.8, administration represents 11.6. Transfer out, 2.5% of the dollars go to transfer, almost 4% goes to debt service. Public services, which is fleet and facilities, represents about 4 or 5%. Recreation, again, recreation's been hovering around 10. It's now 11 because we've added Camp Weewaw, we've added the revenue, we've added the expenditure for Camp Weewaw, and then community development represents about 4.6%. So that is the presentation as far as the budget. Again, we've had the workshops. I tried to point out all of the significant items. I tried to do a very good job to make sure that I got all of the items that we had from the workshops and had them included in the budget. I've listened to a lot of your concerns and your issues, and I know lighting, street lighting, signage, striping are very, very critical, that's what I've been hearing a lot. And so we tried stormwater, that's why we moved those two people in there. So we tried really, really hard to make sure we could get all of those concerns that we've been hearing, sidewalks, new sidewalks, traffic lights. So trying to make sure that we have all of those infrastructure improvements, because that's what we've been hearing a lot, and wanted to make sure we have those. I want to thank the City Council for your direction as well through the last couple of years. It's been a tough year. I'm not gonna hide that. I do believe that our staff has done a really good job. We've got an amazing staff, and they've done a really good job trying to hold back, trying to save, trying to squeeze, just to make sure we can get through this hump or get over this hump. They've done a really good job. I don't think we've sacrificed much in the way of things, because we've either delayed them and we've put them in the budget now going forward. And as you can see from FY21, it's always important, I think, to look back and see what couldn't we do last year that we wanted to do. And you can see in 22, we've done a lot of those things. Taking care of our employees, I think, is very, very important. Yes, we had to cut the merit pay back because it was tough times. Those revenues, were down. But I think it's a great thing, that we were able to reward performance for our employees going forward. This is the first budget where we've actually added people in other areas where we've needed people. Code enforcement was an issue that we were kind of stretched. Building was kind of stretched a little bit. The city clerk's office, with her position. So I think recreation, now bringing on Camp Weewaw, we have a new thing for recreation to work through or whatever. So I just want to thank you for all of your guidance. And I think this is a really good budget. Does it give everybody everything they want? No. But I think I think when you look at our service levels within our departments, we know that we've had issues in our police department with response times based on, and for several years, haven't been adding anybody to the police department, any positions to the police department. I think that's critical, especially in a time we're in right now. I hope that we can get the grant. I think that would be one of the best things we could get if we can get those positions. Keep in mind that grant, I think, is a 3-year period, so it'll fund it now, but we're gonna have to remember in future years that will become part of our budget. And so it will be, as we move through if we get those positions and we add them on, it will be a cost that we have to absorb, we have to take. I also wanna say that when I started here, came back here about over 3 years ago, there were a lot of issues with facilities. I wish we worked faster, but with the pandemic, it slowed us way down. And taking care of our employees was most important at that time. But I know we had a lot of leaking roofs. I'm glad to say that now we have put on the roof at the Finance and Utility Billing Office at the Annex. So I think roof-wise, we're doing pretty good. I think we got some good new roofs all around the city, so hopefully we won't have any leaking problems. Do we need make some more improvements? Yeah, I know we're gonna make some improvements here in the council chambers that will help our citizens to be able to hear and see our meetings. Then we put some money in the budget because we wanna kind of spruce up some of the buildings. We just recently are working on irrigation for City Hall because the irrigation system had to be fixed before we could do planting. So they're getting ready to put the irrigation system in. We've got the ADA compliance issue that we've had at the front of City Hall that we're working on, trying to wrap that up. I think we're waiting on some signs, and then we can do some markings. And then we want to, redo the parking lot. The parking lot in the back here is really, really bad at the back of the building here. The front needs to be sealed and coated or whatever, and that nature. So I think I just want to say thank you. And I am so proud of the staff. We've come a long way during these tough times. And so I think this is a very reasonable budget. I think it's very responsible. I think it gives our citizens some of the things that they need, some of the things that they've been asking for, whether it be streets, sidewalks, traffic lights. So I think hopefully COVID will move on and we will be able to move forward. So thank you. And with that, answer any questions that you may have. Staff is here also, so if you have any questions from the staff, they are here to answer any of those as well.
Commissioner Velasquez, you want to start us out?
No, why, no, not me, not yet.
Not yet. Commissioner Bankson.
Right.
Sure. First of all, I just think, looking over these last few years, interesting, the last pandemic, the year my grandmother was born, it lasted a 3-year process of getting through and righting the ship. And here we are in the midst of this one, and we're seeing that a little bit, history repeated there as she's outliving this pandemic as well. My grandmother, she just got released. So I really do commend the staff. I feel like we've made some significant gains in infrastructure needs in the middle of this, which is amazing. And again, for me, I love all of our public services, all of our staff, but obviously the glaring need has been for our police department getting more, that we're not getting so far behind that it really is gonna hurt us in the long run. So I'm pleased that we're doing that. Again, as you stated,
As you stated, we need to make sure to save in reserve to cover that just in case the grants don't come through. But, and I just kind of want to touch again on, of course, everybody knows that I've kind of championed having reserves and just going back to that. I brought a proposal several years ago, about 6 years ago now, about aiming at that 25 mark. And again, comparing to other cities such as Claremont, Winter Park, I believe at the time, they were at 30%. So I thought that was conservative. But the reason for that number and a flexibility in that number, and I just want to kind of remind everybody of that. The reason was that obviously the 16 number is that baseline for everyone, and the GFOA says now build upon that based upon what you face. And so looking at that we do stand risk of storms, not as much on the coast, so maybe it doesn't have to be as high, but we stand risk of storms such as in 2003, we were the crosshairs of like 3 or 4 in a row. We had a couple of them, 2 years ago. So a portion of that was to be set aside for storm, but there's 3 main reasons. I brought this up back then. One is dealing with storms, which is an issue that Florida has. Number 2 deals with state-level governmental decisions that can affect us, which I remember a few years ago they were talking about doubling the exemption, and we saw what that could do and take a big hit. And so just knowing and being prepared for that. The third is being in the position to make decisions to acquire things, to be able to move on, such as at Camp Weewah, which, I stayed where I stood on that, but not because it's not a tremendous opportunity. And so that's the reason for that. But again, along with that was the opportunity. It's not like we can never touch that. It was simply, if we need to, 4% of that set aside for storms and those related issues. The other 5% for those other 2 issues that we may contend with. So, as in this year, we're needing to dip into that a little bit. The whole proposal was, let that be what we aim for. If we need to dip in, there was a 5-year plan to get us back to that place. So it wasn't inflexible, it was just a good, I think, responsible number to aim for. So because of that, and thank you for you and the staff putting us in that position so we could say, you know what, we need to do it this year. And again, for our police and things where we want to go in our fire department, but we have to take baby steps in some of those areas. As you said, I wish we could get everybody everything they want right now. But the bottom line is, it's the taxpayers that are paying for that. And so I think being responsible there, they have suffered, they have faced challenges, and so I think we're at a good number. Even though technically it is an increase, we're decreasing in our millage rate. It's an increase from rollback rate. So I just think it's a responsible move right now. I think we're stretching that in the sense that helps to cover these things that we've needed, and at the same time keeping it in something that I think is good for our city. So I think we're on target. It's a good budget.
The only thing you need to add is a fourth, which is pandemic,
Yes.
which,
Well,
you
and
know,
that's
when-
part of that,
right,
you know,
and-
unforeseen.
Yeah, because, that was, $3 million hit. We went into, as we said, March from, had it started earlier in the fiscal year, it could have been 5-6 million, but because it was halfway through our fiscal year, we asked staff to step up, do the right thing. Let's where we can hunker down and not, push things out. Let's try to make sure we've got the, reserves to cover it. And we came through with flying colors, but yeah, that was an eye opener, just like what a storm would have been. So absolutely.
And I'm pleased that we were able to bring our merit pay back up. We did take a year where we tightened our belt in that sense, but a lot of our citizens, they lost their incomes completely. So we still, even through that, tried to stay on that level. And again, positioning ourselves to be competitive in the market, because there's all kinds of people that want our people because they're the best. And so we want to constantly remember that. That's our most important and most valuable asset is our people.
Yep. Commissioner Smith.
Well, let me start first by saying, commending our city manager and our employees, our staff, for an outstanding job during the pandemic, and also thanking our employees for being patient with us and understanding during this past budget year when everybody was kind of in a panic when we were talking about going down to 3% with merit pay. And as we promised that we would look at this year, and if this year was better, we go back to 6%, and we've done that. So we thank them for their cooperation in doing that. And you've done a good job with the budget, and we appreciate what you've done. And I have a few questions, and I guess it wouldn't be right if I didn't. The first one is in reference to the speed hump program. Did we use that last year? Did anyone use the speed hump program last year?
No, no, Commissioner, we did not have any. And I don't think we even had anybody apply.
We had some people talk about it.
We had some
We
people
one-
talk about it, and then once they see this criteria, that's set that you have to meet,
Yes.
there's certain criteria that has to be met, and I think a couple of them, the criteria wasn't met based on number of cars, based on speed. But
we
that
still
money
have
was
it in
not
the budget.
used, but we're gonna rebudget that money. Rather than just keep carrying that number forward, we've budgeted again 50,000, and if that program does well, then we can, go to reserves if we need to bring more for that program.
Okay.
But, and now, what we can do is we can get Pam oversees that program, so I can get her to also put together, which areas did request it, so at least you can see which areas were asking for it.
All right. The other thing I'd like for us to take a look at is our impact fees. As you know, Orange County increased their impact fees. And so since we're the cheapest city around, developers are going to start coming here. So we don't want them to come because we're the cheapest. And I know the state put a limit on what we can do, what percentage we can increase impact fees, but I'd like for us to take a look at that so that we can.
That's being reviewed right now, so you're gonna see that. For transportation, water, sewer, and reclaimed water, you're gonna see those impact fee, the studies will come back to you for that.
All right. The other item that I'd like us to take a look at, and I think I mentioned it before, is our sidewalks in downtown Apopka along 441. They are in bad shape, especially on the south side of 441 where all the businesses are with the awnings overhanging because it's in a lot of shade. And I thought at one time we said we was going to ask the businesses to take care of that, but obviously it hasn't been done. They're still filthy. And so if they're not going to do it, it's our city, and the sidewalks need to look nice.
Oh, so just cleaning, not that they're in disrepair?
No, they just need to be
okay.
pressure washed.
Okay.
And probably from at least, what is that? Marvin Zanders, where the discount auto parts store is, all the way to Burger
Town
King.
center, yeah.
Yes, all right. The streets look bad, so we need to take a look at that. Other than that, I'm happy with where we are, and want to keep going forward.
Okay. Commissioner Becker?
Yeah, so a couple questions on, so the utility tax rate, am I incorrect in thinking that's synonymous with the public services tax?
Say that again.
The public services tax, is that
It's the same. Public service tax, municipal service tax, those are the same.
interchangeable wording? Correct. Right, so the rate on it before was 10%, is that still 10%? We just removed the cap?
Yes, that's what you,
Right.
so it was, well, we
No,
made another
we
change too.
put another-
It was 10% or a cap of $20 per month. So we reduced the $20 cap and made it go up to, took the full 10%. But we, over 5,000 kilowatt hours, we reduced that 10% to help those
So
those
the
large.
point being is that if your utility bill is $200 or less, you're not impacted in any way based off of those changes. Because
Correct.
the $20
Roughly.
cap was $200. So
Correct.
again, by saying we're contemplating lowering the millage rate because of the public services tax increase, it's not affecting every single utility bill.
No, it would only affect those that are over 200 from that standpoint.
Correct.
It affects like the HOAs will pay more for water because it's on water, gas customers. So it affects a lot of our businesses, a lot of our commercial, industrial, those are the ones that got hit.
But then
hit
the
big.
large consumers, we've given some level of relief based off of what we did on that agreement.
Yes, for the, but they're,
Okay.
yeah, real large.
And then on the general fund, you had mentioned that we were currently hovering around 31.7%. This coming year, based off of some of the funding that we're using out of general fund reserve, it's down to 25%. So let's just call it 22. That's 900 basis reduction, 900 basis point reduction. Is that a net reflection of the WeWa purchase?
No.
Meaning, does that account for the dollars that we used to fund WeWa, all of that transaction?
No, well, today, as you sit right now, yes, because we've had to use some of that reserve to pay for Camp Weewah when we closed. But if you recall, we had like 5 funding sources. One was we had the 1.1 for Duke Energy, which that money's in our fund, so we would be able to use that. The budget, the adjustment or the amendment that you did this afternoon at 1:30, $1 million of the impact fee went there, so there's $2 million. We have $1 million in a grant we're waiting to hear. It sounds positive, got our fingers crossed. Let's hope that we're gonna get that $1 million. And then the Sandpiper property we haven't closed on yet, but we have an agreement on that. That's 1.3. The airport we have 4. So very small amount of the reserves, if any, that we would have to use, hopefully. But currently, as you sit, we've had to use some of that, advance it to close.
If nothing changes, we're at floor of, call it 22%.
Yeah, I would say
22,
that. I
25.
would say that's pretty good, correct. Based
And
on,
then going based off of what our auditor said when they did the CAFR presentation, they were comfortable with being 20% or higher. So I'm just going off of what our
Right,
paid
what
auditor
they said
tells
was
us is
that's what they
is
said.
healthy for the city of Apopka. Why is it such a large hit, though? Because when I'm thinking, we've got the CARES Act funding that's going to help pay for some of this. We've got the $2.9 million Duke funds. I'm not sure how much of that $10 million basically has been paid in this fiscal year. But if not, if the majority of it's going to be paid in this upcoming fiscal year, why are we taking such a hit in our general fund reserve?
You mean, we're only getting 3.5 million?
I thought it's 7 million for.
yeah, but you only get
3.5
3.5 the first.
this year.
You have to wait for the next year to get the other half.
So when you say this year, the budget year that we're talking about for 22, or?
So we received half of the 7 million, 3.5, and we've used $1 million, so we still have $2.5 million that is sitting from those reserve dollars that have certain restrictions on them, which we're gonna do. We're gonna bring that back and present that so you can see, here's the 2.5, here's what it can be spent on. It has the restrictions are really, really, I mean, it's broadband, water, sewer. It's, it can't, it's got a lot of restrictions on it, except for that piece where you might have lost revenue from these years before, from the couple years before from the pandemic, which, if you recall, I think we were around 3 million that we were showing in a reduction for lost revenue. Again, $1 million of this that we're using for resurfacing. So you do have $2.5 million there that has restrictions on it that we will bring back to be able to figure out how we want to spend those dollars for those restrictions. And then you're talking about the reserves that we've used for the Duke Energy money. That is completely earmarked. We've earmarked almost all of those dollars except for the 1.1, but we're, again, if we use it for Camp Weewa, then it pretty much will be, we will have allocated those dollars, that 2.9.
And one thing I'll just bring up on the CARES money is I've reached out to Senator Rubio, Senator Scott, and Congresswoman Demings, just so you know that the city of Ocoee, because they're a smaller city, under 50,000, they got $24 million, and because we were over 50, we got 7.
Yeah.
It makes absolutely no sense. I mean, and there's other cities compared like to St. Cloud, just over 50, they got like 8 million. You go to Winter Park, they got 14 million. So it's unbelievable the difference in what we should have gotten compared to just, based on population, we didn't get our fair share, let's put it that way.
My microphone turned off. So in terms of the millage decrease, I know that when we were setting the trim notice, it seemed like the council up here was very comfortable on staying at the 4.28% or 4.28 mils. And then, staff recommendation reverted back to the 4.18. And we use words like needed people, we've been stretched, things are always going up in terms of the general fund expenditures. There's things that we need to have contingency for beyond just what's in our reserve fund balance. So I'm just curious as to why, in the last meeting we had, you said that we're trending to have a $500K deficit on our sales tax revenue. There's some uncertainty there from a revenue stream perspective. We've got, I respect the fact that, in order to apply for the grants or to try and win those grants, we can't have those positions budgeted, but we can have funds secured to fund those positions should they not be covered by those grant funds. So I'm wondering why we're trying to do this to ourselves again, where we keep on saying that we don't have money, people are stretched, we need people, we need stuff done in the facilities, and yet we're going to reduce our millage rate by 1/10 of a mil. It just doesn't make sense to me.
I think, Commissioner, if you go back to when we were increasing the public service tax or the utility service tax, we made it clear that that was going to be a hit to some of our customers. And so we talked about at that time, we know this is going to be a hit for some of them. And so we had mentioned that if we can, at budget time, the number that we can control to help offset or provide some assistance with that.
Who's we?
The staff. I think the staff, because if you remember at those meetings, we talked about that, because there were some concerns about, oh my gosh, well, someone's paying 10% and the cap comes off, they're going to pay, $200 more a month or whatever. And we've had several phone calls where people have called us that have bigger bills. And going to have bigger bills. And so at that time, what we told them was we would look at that. Staff will look to see, ultimately it's a city council's decision, but we would look at that to see if there was a chance that we could provide a little relief somewhere else since we're taking since they're getting a bigger hit from their electric and water. So, and then the other thing I want to say too is keep in mind when we did that, it hit July 1. So you got 3 months worth of additional revenue there of probably, I would say, estimated over $300,000 in additional revenue that you'll have that we wouldn't normally have in this fiscal year.
But I think, if I use a loose comparison. Microphone keeps on turning off, sorry. If I use a loose comparison, that's like saying to our water customers, we do a rate study and we're increasing rates, and that goes up by X% every year. And it's like saying, well, in order for us to offset the burden of you to have an increased water bill, we're going to reduce your millage rate at the expense of all the other expenditures that we have to use that millage rate for, whether it be public safety, whether it be finance department, records clerks, whomever, building department. So I can't justify just because the public services tax went up, and it really didn't go up, the cap was removed. And again, it doesn't affect anybody, it doesn't affect people that pay $200 or less. And yet we still talk about how we don't have money to do critical needs. We're stretching dollars, we're rubbing nickels together. Why are we trying to get to a spot where we've got $400K reduction on our overall tax revenue?
Well,
and again, there's, we've got a lot of folks in the room. We had heard from our fire chief that absolutely we want to get to staffing of 3 people per truck, and yet we don't have anything in the budget to do that. Even the stuff that's grant funded is not on our glide path to do that. I absolutely agree with baby steps. We don't have to do all of that staffing day one, but what's baby steps about what we've got on the budget thus far to accommodate that?
Well, I think, Commissioner, let me go back, because I want to, when you talk about public service tax, you talked about property tax, and then enterprise funds, those two, the utility tax and the property tax, are all in the same fund. So that revenue is all in one fund, whereas the enterprise fund is a separate fund, a separate charge to run the business. So you don't
Take
normally.
sales tax as an example.
We don't
then.
usually reduce the property tax because we've increased the enterprise fund.
Take
because it
sales
pays
tax
for
as an
itself.
example.
But
Take sales tax.
And you could.
So if we're saying that we're trending 500K lower in sales tax, and that's what feeds our street improvements fund, same thing that happened last budget year, right? We decided, hey, we want to keep the millage at what it is because there are infrastructure things that need to be done. Now, granted, again, like you said in the presentation, it was like almost 500K worth of dollars that maybe was spent on some lights, but there was no road resurfacing done. But that $500,000 shortfall, ironically enough, is the same amount that we're trying to reduce the millage rate by.
And that is, you can look at it that way, I agree. But what I will tell you is when we built this budget, we looked at the critical needs. We looked at our police. We looked at all the critical needs, and we looked at fire, we looked at fire, we looked at police, we looked at public works, we looked at recreation. We looked through all of our all of our services, and police was the one that has been suffering and the one that we haven't really done anything with, and that's what, this year where we're trying to put some resources there and applying for a grant to get more positions there.
Well, and again, that's a general funded expenditure, and yet we've got 10 officers that we're hoping we get the grant for. If we don't get that, I'm sure Chief McKinley still wants officers to be able to satisfy the growth in our city. And I firmly agree with you. But it's not just that. I mean, Commissioner Banks has said it appropriately. Taxpayers will pay for it. On the fire side, they'll pay for it potentially with their lives. We have a fire department that can only respond to one structural fire properly. I mean, that doesn't tell me that we're spending enough to do what's right by our residents.
I don't want to speak for the fire chief. I would want him to, he could give
Sure,
you that
that's
information if
fine.
you want to hear that from him. But I know we have an ISO of 1. I know there are lots of people who want to get into our fire department. I get calls every day with people saying, I want to get in the fire department.
That's not the
But
point
what
I'm
I'm
trying to
saying
make,
is, from a standpoint, as a city administrator, you asked me to look at critical needs. You asked me to look at across all the organization, because the general fund funds all of those functions. And so when we looked at that and we met with staff and their concerns and everything, that's what we did. We looked at the critical needs, and the police department's response times were doing this. The fire department's response times were still good and
Yeah,
where they
response
needed to
times,
be. So
the
it was.
point that I'm making is not about response times. It's about having the right amount of personnel to meet the standards for responding to those calls, not necessarily ISO related. So we're commingling points of view here. I would certainly love to hear from Chief Weiland. Another point being, and I asked the question during the budget workshops, was around the recreation expense. We did this survey, so residents I would think would have an expectation that as a result of those surveys for new facilities, that there would be budget for that. Currently, there's not. I think Mr. Foreman said that maybe in October or November that might come back before council, but we don't have any expenditure for that currently budgeted. So again, I go back to, we have things that we've talked about, and yet we're still trying to reduce by $400,000, a tenth of a mil.
Well, and to those points on the recreation improvements, those are going to be $1 million improvements, and so that you can't. There's not enough funding in this budget to budget those improvements. When that comes back to you, the city council can look at that and decide, hey, I want to invest $10 million in these improvements, and we would have to.
I disagree with $1 million. Like each one of those is going to be $1 million to build. I don't agree with necessarily the thought that we're looking at $1 million expenditure for each thing that needs to be done.
I mean, some of the items that were on that list where we talked about moving fields and making new fields, new ball fields or whatever, they were pretty costly. So there were some high numbers in there. But again, I mean, when that comes back, it'll be the city council can look at that from the consultant and determine, how many fields they want to, if they want to add fields, do you want to add, baseball fields, softball fields? Are we going to add, an ADA playground? Are we, those are the things that are going to be in that list. One of the things the major concerns we saw was the lighting was very big. A lot of people were wanting extra lighting, so we tried to work that in. So that was an amount that we got in here. The bathrooms was on the top of the list, wanting more bathrooms, and so we've been able to manage to get those in as well. So I think some of the ones that you're going to see come back to you are going to be significant when it talks about if they want more tennis courts or whatever. Those kinds of things are going to be rather costly, and I don't think you can fund those. I don't see how you would fund those through your normal budget without some kind of an additional funding source.
Well, yeah, I mean, absent any kind of cost breakdown of anything that's being contemplated on the rec side, it would be irresponsible to say what those costs are. But
Right.
I'm just saying that giving away a $400,000 contingency in terms of a tenth of a millage rate reduction, I just think is not appropriate. There's so much that needs to be done in this city to just arbitrarily reduce our millage by a tenth of a mil. I just think that there's people needs, there's just a lot of need that still needs to happen in the city of Apopka, and I cannot stand when we go throughout the year and talk about, oh, we can't afford it, or it's tiresome.
Well, and again, the budget you have before you is presented based on the critical needs and meeting with all of the departments and going through the workshops and everything. Again, it's the wishes of the council. If they want, that, the millage rate to additional $400,000, we can, earmark that where you want it earmarked. I mean,
I'll just ask
it's
one
one of those
pointed
things I just
question.
think we were-
Do we not feel that we should be marching towards 3 people engines?
Based on the information stuff that I've seen, I'm not sure that that's exactly where, I don't think that's something that we have to go to right away.
Okay,
You have
that's
an
fine,
ISO
that's
of 1, you meet all the response times, you meet all the criteria.
I disagree with that.
But again, the fire chief would speak better to that because that is his expertise, and so I think, he could tell you if, that he thinks that adding that person would be
I think it
piece that
puts
we
our
need to
own
do,
staff in
so-
jeopardy as well as our citizens, and I'll just end it there.
Well, let me ask now, well, I didn't address that because I thought when we talked about these 2 grants, one for the 10 police officers, and if we're buying 10 cars, my assumption was if we didn't get the grant, then we were gonna hire the 10 police officers. And likewise, we had 6 fire positions, that's for a grant, and my assumption was if we didn't get the grant, we'll fund that as well, because when I looked at it, when you talk about putting 3 people per vehicle, that was 18 additional firefighters, and I knew we couldn't afford 18 at one time, so I thought we was gonna do 6 per year to get to that point, was my understanding.
Well, I think if you recall, the positions that were applied for in the grant, 3 were district chiefs, and then 3 were firefighters. So those were the 2 that were applied for in the grant.
Commissioner Velasquez?
With me, why I didn't want to go first is because obviously I'm working the real tail end of the last budget because I got elected in December. And, I looked at the budget year from 2021 and what I was realizing is, did we reach our goals with the last budget? I mean, I don't know what was budgeted and what we achieved from it. And then we have this year's budget, and it really was a long laundry list. But I'm just trying to figure out because I remember when we spoke, you said that a lot was carried over now into this budget year. So what did we accomplish, and what goals did we reach from the last budget?
Well, I think.
Because it seems like I'm always hearing the same thing.
Well, I think if you look back in the last budget, the current budget that we're in, we have met a lot of the things that are in the budget because we had to do a lot of infrastructure improvements with roofs, repair and maintenance. We've done sidewalk repair. We've done a lot. We've had a street sweeping program. We didn't have a street sweeping program 2.5 years ago. So we have a street sweeping program. We've added, we've done more in stormwater. We've cleaned lots of stormwater drains. in places that we hadn't before. And so we've met a lot of those things even during the COVID, some of the projects. So we haven't left many of those projects out there. I mean, one of the projects that we talked about was the council chambers, the audio portion of the council chambers or whatever. Granted, we did receive the $2.9 million from Duke, so it allowed us to advance some of those projects that we had. But a lot of those projects have been done. All of the roofs have been done now. So, I mean, we've done a lot of the things that we said we would do in those budgets. So
again, we're depending on a lot of grants to come in, but are we prepared if we don't get those grants?
Well, like I said earlier, if you don't get those grants for those portions, you've got money in your reserves. So that's why you have money in the reserve. So you can use that money in the reserves to help you with those grant opportunities should you not get them, or you have to have a match. Maybe you have to have it. They tell us you're going to get 8, but we want 10, so we'll only have to fund 2. So you've got the reserves to do that. Does the $400,000 give you more reserve? Yeah, I guess it could. Keep in mind you've got $300 additional thousand in this year that you're making up from utility service tax increase that you're getting from the citizens that you've already hit with. So I mean, it adds $400,000 to the reserves that you could use for that opportunity. Again, if the timing is kind of bad, because if we just knew what the grants were going to be, it would be a lot different. But again, it would give you 400 more into the reserves, which you already have a healthy reserve. It give you 400 more into the reserves that you could apply to these projects. But
So let me ask you about the CARES money. I mean, we have 2.5 million. We still have really the Duke Energy money. How much is left for the Duke Energy money?
the Duke Energy money is pretty much earmarked. It's pretty much done. You have about 1.1 left that we didn't spend because we were talking about paying off some debt service, but we were going to use that for Camp Weewa. So if we don't use that for Camp Weewa, then you're going to have to use the reserves to pay for the Camp Weewa, and you'd have that. But most of those dollars have been earmarked. Several of them you've already done budget amendments for, the restrooms, the storage facility. So a lot of those dollars, there's a few projects still left that haven't come back that will come back to you. And then at that time, if you can redirect them or use them for that earmark purpose is why we have it earmarked.
And the CARES money, you keep saying that we don't know what we can use it for. They had to have sent some kind of guideline.
They've sent guidelines for us to look at. The guidelines that they've sent to us are water, sewer, and broadband projects. That's where a lot of it is. Or to work with COVID items. Well, we've done a really good job. We've received grants and done a really good job with our COVID items. So you can use it on COVID items, equipment.
What are some of the COVID items?
You could use it equipment, different types of equipment that are COVID related. And then there's, like I said, it didn't give you it wasn't broad. It didn't tell you could just, use it for wherever you wanted. It had those restrictions on it. And so we feel we're comfortable with the $1 million that we're using for the resurfacing because we had lost revenue. We're still trying to figure out, working with the Treasury, what is that lost revenue number? Because it is the most confusing for me. They don't even know. We're still struggling with that. And I'm working with other jurisdictions. What do you do? Everybody's doing something different. But I want to make sure we follow those guidelines because there are quarterly reporting. I just filed one this week. There are quarterly reports that you have to do. And I want to make sure we follow those guidelines and those funds go exactly where they're supposed to based on that formula. And so that's why we're going to bring that back to the city council so they can see, here are the restrictions, here's what you got left, where do you want to fund it? But a lot of those projects are enterprise projects. A lot of the places where they directed those dollars were most of our enterprise projects. But we'll bring that. I mean, like I said, we're getting all that information together so that we can bring it to you so you can see. Do you want to do one project with it? Like Mayor was saying, we only got $7 million. I feel like we were shortchanged. It doesn't really make any sense that, our neighbor, Ocoee, got $24 million, and they're just, we're not that much more population than they are. And because it threw us over into that other basket, we only got 7. So, it's unfortunate. I know we're working, trying to see if we can, get some more So, but
I mean,
maybe
I'm
we'll get some
happy
bigger
that we're
grants.
picking up 10 police officers, because, I mean, from as far back as I can remember, McKinley has been asking for the personnel, and you've had attrition, you've had people, you've had police officers leave, so the numbers always, he gets 2 steps ahead, 3 steps ahead, and then he goes back and we never seem to kind of increase the personnel for police.
Well, and I think Commissioner Velasquez, let me say this, and for the commissioners as a whole, we're growing, and you're right, and we need to remember that as we grow, and we need to remember in our future budgets, as the future budgets come, this is 10 police officers for this year, but that number's gonna change, and the future with the growth and everything, you don't just add 10 this coming and then that's it, you know? So same with fire. As we grow, we're gonna need more add fire. This is gonna be it's a balancing thing that we're gonna have to really look at every year going forward from now, because we're growing a lot quicker than we used to. And so future budgets, we need to be thinking about that there's going to be some future costs, some future revenues that are gonna have to be generated and done for growing into the future. So,
So with the fire, I remember at a time, because, I was the commissioner from 2014 to 2018. What I've never really figured out is how many firefighters are there on a shift back then and how many are now? Because what I'm hearing is we don't have the 3-person on a apparatus. I'm learning not to say a truck. And there is a concern about that, because not only have the parkway has expanded, so they're now answering calls in a distance where we need to make sure that they're able to respond safely for themselves and for the people that they're responding to. So what I'd like to ask the chief is, what is his shift right now in order to satisfy that 3-man truck? How many do you have on a shift?
Well, I think before we go to the 3-man shift, we need to talk about the way we're doing it now and why it's made sense since, what year did we go to the squad?
2004. is
So
when
why don't we talk
or
about why we
2002
went
actually,
to
sorry.
the way we do it today versus a 3-man truck?
Yeah, so, back in 2002, sorry, correct myself, is when we first implemented the squad vehicle. It's actually, believe it or not, well, I was hired. I was hired one of the 12 for the squad vehicle at that time. It's a program that was actually adapted from Houston Fire Department. It was one of the big departments who actually used this type, and they still use it to this day. You can look on their website, there's squads for that. And basically, that piece of equipment for us is to augment manpower. We can use it for fire calls, we can use it for EMS calls, we can use it for all sorts of things. But we currently have 4 people on those squad units. We have 2 at Station 1 and 2 at Station 5. So we have 4 people that we can move very quickly throughout the city and get them on scenes to a fire scene, an extrication scene, a person in cardiac arrest, certain things like that. So it helps us move those people in a fluid manner, if that makes sense, in multiple capacities. That, for us, is why we have our ISO. For ISO 1, it gets kind of confusing. They require a certain number of people on scene for a structure fire. Because we have those 4 people, we can count those towards Engine 1 staffing. We can count the ambulance from Ambulance 1 on Engine 1 staffing. Because all ISO looks at is the fire truck and how many people are on scene. ISO requires 6 people per fire truck, or whatever we actually respond. So if our deployment model, which our deployment model is for a structure fire, 2 engines in a tower, they want 18 people on scene. They want 6 people per fire truck and 6 people per tower truck. Because of those squads, again, we can move those people, ambulances, same thing. You can show up on a pickup truck. As long as there's 6 people represented on scene per fire truck, that's what ISO looks at. Does that make sense?
Go ahead, keep going.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
So our current deployment model, again, using those squads, we're able to put those people where we need to in a quick manner as well. You know, getting a tower truck, getting a fire truck, responding down the road from here, going all the way to Station 2, sometimes Station 5 would take a while. Well, now we have the squad vehicles, we can get there pretty quick. So, again, kind of a win-win for us. Our current deployment model, we're able to meet those standards. And again, ISO, 0.8% of the country, you know, and it's something, I think that's, you know, so I mentioned earlier, it's not just about ISO. We get that, you know, but that's the model. It's the standard of care. They use, it's a third-party group that looks at us. It's not us rating ourselves. This is an outside entity that
So,
kind of.
but you're talking about responding to one fire.
Mm-hmm.
So now you have one fire, you have an EMS emergency, and you may have another EMS emergency, because COVID right now is creating a lot of
Sure.
emergencies more for EMS. But now you have a fire, or you have an accident on the 429. Do you have enough personnel to go out to all of these jobs? And my concern has been, we're building all these warehouses. Eventually, we already have Amazon, Gorgia. I mean, can our fire department respond safely? I mean, the last thing I want is a fire truck to go with 2 people, and they're dealing with something that they need 6 people. So that's my concern. It's one of those what ifs, but it could happen because we are growing that fast, but we're not meeting those needs. We're not ahead of the 8 ball right now. We're just kind of surviving because we haven't met those emergencies yet, but they are going to come. And I'll tell you that they are going to come. And that's my concern, is that we're kind of sitting around and saying, okay, we're good now. But you know what? We have to prepare ourselves, our public safety, for the growth, not just the growth of the city and the demand by our residents, but for the emergencies that will happen. We have to be proactive for that. And so that's why I'm asking you, well, how many are on a shift? Because I remember back in 2014, we didn't have this problem. I think that our
What
fire
problem?
department, but at the same time, we were much smaller. We didn't have as much growth back then. But I'm seeing a lot of growth, and I have expressed that to Ed. I said, we have, and I think I expressed it even during the budget meetings. We have warehouses, we have taller buildings, and we have now new communities being spread out. My concern is, can our fire department meet those needs?
So again, you're absolutely correct. You know, we're going from, and I think we talked about it, foliage capital of the world, to a more industrial, you know, commercial type structures. Proactive approach for me is what I've asked for. The 6 personnel this year, as we look to the future, I want to grow us, but in that structured manner. I want, let's talk about safety. We need district chiefs. You know, that's a critical part that adds a safety officer that we need now. You know, responding with one district chief right now, if there is one major scene going on, we're relying on our command support off-duty personnel, or sometimes us chief officers that are on staff. That's why I've asked for it the last 2 years. That we need in place because of our span of control. You know, right now and one thing, you know, the first thing I did was rearrange some of our personnel to put people in the higher density areas that our risks are at. That's why I moved people from Station 5. It was unpopular, I get that, but the need was here. We run most of our calls out of here. I also established an officer on our tower truck. We never had that before. Because that's a safety issue.
Established a what?
An officer, lieutenant.
Oh, okay.
Because to me, that is a safety-related issue. You need to have those personnel on that scene, on that apparatus to run that apparatus properly. That's been my whole goal along, is to get us going in the right direction. We need district chiefs. Yes, I want to start adding personnel so that we can meet that demand for the future, for this growth. We all know it's coming. So these 6 people this year that we're asking for, that's what I want. We're going to move forward through the next few years. Absolutely, we're going to look at our growth. We know it's coming. You know, like Edward said, next year, where we were back in 2014-15, we've grown by 7,000 people. We've also added 2 stations. We've added How many people? You know, we're marching along, but I think we're doing it in a responsible manner. You know, it's something that, again, my goal is to get everyone home safe, period. And this year, this past couple of years, it's been tough, you know, with the COVID thing and trying to balance everything. But everything that we've tried to do, and it's not just response models now and things like that. It's where are we at? Where were we before then? You guys can attest. I wanted to immediately the earphones, our tones at night, to our physicals. Everything that I've been trying to do is to make us better and safer for those guys and girls right there. And looking towards the future, I can tell you right now, yes, we can respond adequately. ISO says that we're top 0.8% of the country in responding. And it's not just fire-related stuff. We're just looking today. Our ROSC, return of spontaneous circulation, average up throughout the nation. You arrive on scene, someone's dead on arrival. Average is 27%. We're at 35%. So if our numbers were going the wrong direction, I'd be up here screaming and hollering. But we're doing things correctly. We're making changes and looking at things to modify the way we respond in a good way. You know, that EMS is, 85% of what we do is EMS. Do we need those people? Yeah. Or our ambulances, but I want to get there in that controlled, responsible way. Absolutely.
Chief, tell us about the ISO rating. What are all the different criteria to get to that ISO? And then what our score was compared to what the minimum for an ISO 1 is, please, sir.
Yeah, so our current rating, our current score right now is 100.4 out of 100. We actually get 5.5 extra points, thanks to gerrymandered, because of the, public outreach and things like that, things you heard today with the camps and stuff. Things are involved with it, our water supply, obviously, our training, certain number of hours of training we have to do each year, our response times. Again, something else, we mentioned what's relevant. Fire exponentially grows every minute. And that's one thing we're looking at when we talk about response times. For fires, putting wet stuff into red stuff as quick as possible is what we need to do. And when we look at that in our deployment models and things like that, I know, and I apologize about the confusing maps last time, but that's what I was trying to show you is we're reaching those goals. We're putting, things on scene. Are we gonna grow? Do we need to grow along with that? Absolutely, 100%. You will never hear me ever not say that. So 40%, again, water supply, typically, different percentages for the type of equipment we carry, what's on each apparatus. And again, each of those point systems kind of, once you establish the number of people we have, again, those squads help augment that power. So now that we have credit for that truck, every time it rolls on a fire, we get certain points. And everybody, and it sounds funny, loses points. FDNY is probably only departments that actually has 6 people in the truck. I don't even know if they have that, but so there's always some give and take. When you look at a deployment model, as soon as a call goes out, our deployment model changes. You ask, well, as soon as, are we going to be able to respond? Well, as soon as Station 3 goes on a call, Station 3 is not covered. We respond from other stations and things like that, and even we have agreements in place. That's why we help Orange County. Orange County helps us. So, when there's critical needs and things like that, certainly, there's things in place to prevent catastrophic events. If we weren't able to meet any of those, I'd be screaming. It would be a different story. But does that answer your questions?
It does, but I have concerns because our firefighters have expressed a concern of the 3-man truck. That has been a concern for them. So I want to advocate for them.
Absolutely.
And make
that's
sure
my job
that.
too.
Yeah.
I think that sometimes it seems like it's been forgotten lately, but I'm here for them, and it's something there's a goal, there's the same goal we have. It's just different ways of getting there sometimes. And, do we want to eventually get there? Absolutely. It's going to take, this year, my goal is the district chief and an extra person out at Station 1, backwards person at Station 1. When we open Station 6, I'm asking for enough people to again have extra people to start throwing out in other trucks. We're gonna get there. I know we are. Just, most important thing are those guys and girls, to me. That's why I hope that I emphasize some of my programs I'm trying to implement is a succession plan. The number of people, you look at our stats, you kind of asked the other day, how many people are new, how many people are in the middle, how many people are towards retirement? All of them are important. From the newest guide here to those people in the middle, I think 40% are 5 years or less. But that's industry-wide right now. It's just it's a shift that's kind of happening in the fire service. Those people are critical. The people in the middle that we're getting developed to be our leaders, that's why I'm putting these programs in place. That's why I want a succession plan. That's why I want guys checked off. If you're replacing a lieutenant, I want you to be qualified as that person. So when we get to that point, I'm gonna come back and ask you guys for money for those people who are riding out of grade. But we gotta get there first. That's the.
How are you feeling the positions now? In other words, I saw a few promotions, so I congratulate those promotions. How do you feel the position that they leave to be to go on to the next position?
So if we promoted a lieutenant, they
Right.
came from engineer rank, there's now another list of people waiting to become an engineer. And then we would hire a new hire at that point. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Or are you talking about on a daily basis?
No, I'm just talking, like, right now, in the staff for the firefighters, the fire department, are you fully staffed or are you understaffed right now? In other words, if you're required to have, how many firefighters in?
So we have 34 assigned to each shift.
You have 34 right now assigned
Yes,
to you?
assigned each shift. Now, understand, we typically allow, and it's been crazy here, typically allow 4 people off, maybe 5, without causing overtime. So 30 is ideal, but 29 is allowed. At that point, at 29, we would hire someone to fill that position for overtime. So we have 29 people on each shift, each day.
Chief, the last time that you did a hiring, how many people were you trying to hire for and how many applicants did you have?
We were hiring for 4, and we had over 120 applicants.
So you would say that's, people want to come to Apopka?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
They want to come, but I want them to stay, too.
How many have you lost due to going to other departments in the last 4 years?
Well, 4 years, oh gosh, 4 years probably close to 25, just retirements, things like that.
No, I mean,
Or the last-
lost to other departments,
Lost to
or,
other
or, and even that would be, local departments. I mean, obviously, if you move to
Yeah.
to Key
question-
West, then
yeah.
that would not be a,
You had asked over, the last few years, actually.
Yeah.
I looked that up. We lost 13 over the last 3 years. 3 years, I'm sorry, 2 years. 2 moved out of state, 2 left industry altogether, 4 have retired, 2 moved on to family reasons in other regions of our state, and then 3 left for other departments.
so we lost 3 in the
Out of
last.
13.
So,
So did they get replaced? Did they get replaced?
Yes, we
They did?
actually have a couple vacancies right now. We're starting, one of my goals too is to start a new hiring process each year and a promotional process each year, just so we have a running list. So we're prepared.
So the 6 that we're getting, are they filling those vacancies or are they on top of?
Additional.
They're going to be additional? Okay.
if the grant's approved. So I'm just trying to reconcile the incongruity between yourself and Mr. Bass in terms of getting to that 3-man staffing, 3-person staffing, I should say. Are you aligned or not aligned there? Because it seems like you're trying to use like squad vehicles to meet the ISO numbers, response times. But I'm talking about the safety of the people there and the people that they're treating. Because when you roll up on scene, if you're on a tower truck, let's say, and you've got 2 people on there, logistically, and I'm a layperson, I'm by no means an expert, but that just doesn't seem like it would afford the opportunity to triage the situation from a victim perspective. And so I'm curious, what other agencies around here have less than 3-man staffing, or 3-person staffing, I should say?
I know parts of Lake County have.
And they're on their trajectory to staff up to 3. But like
sure. I don't
municipal
know
cities.
We're the only one. But we're also the only one that have squads.
But right, but we're unique too because we also have transport services, medical transports where you have apparatus are outside of our city down for normal maintenance. So yeah, you may be able to hit response times, but to be like having 29 on staff, the minimum staffing for a structural fire is 15. We can only, our own department, handle one structural fire at a time. And we're a city that's growing 55,000 residents. We got 17,000 households in this city. The idea, to Commissioner Velasquez's point, the idea that there's going to be a time when there's multiple structural incidents is there's probably a pretty high probability of that. And so, again, are we trying to or not trying to get to the 3-person engine, and what is the plan to do that?
Yes, I mean, that's the whole eventual goal, but what I want to look at too is doing it the right way with our growth. You know,
What do
we're,
you,
again,
expand on that one. Because what do you mean the right way?
well, if the right way to me is currently, again, we have 3 different things we look at. Are we able to, outcome-based also? Are we able to put those people that we're asking, the 17 people for the structure fire? Yes. Looking at the growth with some of the, some of those things that change with industrial-type structures. That we're looking forward to the future. As more of those get added, yeah, we're going to have to up our manpower. At the same time, we're growing.
I'm just curious because
how many-
it's not a definitive budget item. We're saying grant funding for 3 district chief positions and 3 other positions. I get that, but again, it's grant dependent, and yet we're giving money back. And again, I know the rebuttal is going to be, well, that's why we have general fund. Well, if it's down to 22% at this point, we're going to be fighting for general fund reserve dollars, not just with fire, with all the other things that we've talked about. So there's going to be a scarcity of resource if we want to keep it above the 20% or close to 25%. So again, I go back to the fact of why are we not on a glide path of putting stuff in our budget to get these positions secured officially, not dependent upon grants? Why are, and this may be not your question, but again, I struggle with the fact that we're giving $400,000 back when we have this critical need.
Chief, how many fires did we fight last year?
31 was the number.
So less than 1 a week. Okay.
Well, for me, just to add to the perspective, I know when I came on, in 2016, our tax base, our tax rate at that point, the millage rate was 3.76. And not long after that, we began to push for, wait a minute, this is unsustainable, because we'll have to keep raising it and it will never be enough. And so we pushed, and I know Commissioner Becker agreed at that time when we pushed for the impact fees, because we can't keep having the same people pay for, they've already paid for their fire. And the city's growing, the new growth should pay for itself. And that's where, and I think Commissioner Smith mentioned that I think, I know that wasn't real popular for the developers, but the bottom line is we need to take care of our public servant. Our safety is job one. And over those last few years, we have put a significant amount for fire at that point to beef up their infrastructure and different things at where the police department was suffering for some of those years. We've tried to move, but it was, well, we won't move as much there because we've got to put more for fire. And we really did a lot in those last few years, and we did increase the millage rate, again, incrementally up and up. And at some point, it's like, where is our impact going to catch up with that? So all the new growth, if it's bringing in an impact, then it's going to help sustain that. Because to me, that's the buzzword. Is this sustainable? If not, then we're always playing catch up and yay, we've got more because of a grant, but then the next year, we're going to have to pay for all that plus add. So for me, this year, we took it, rather than it being equal, fire and police gaining ground, because we really had put a lot in fire infrastructure there, and the police had suffered. For me, knowing where we're at, trying to find that balance also for the taxpayer as well, I think that's important. I'm hearing those cries and hearing the difference that we've gone up. Yeah, Would I love to, let's do it all this year? Well, there's lots of areas we could do that, but we are making ground. And I talked with you about this, as I've heard from different ones there. And, we want to have this heart of compassion for them, for the taxpayer, for how are we going to pay for this going forward. So to me, what's the sustainable model? And for the new growth, it's got to be, a majority of that has got to be the impact that the growth creates needs to pay for itself. When we do that, then we're on a sustainable model that we can now keep taking bites until we get where we want to be. And I think the 3 per apparatus, thank you for correction, is a noble goal. It's a safe goal. And so I'm just trying to hear what you're saying, not just statistically, but in practicality. Are we safe? Are we providing service that is that? Again, we have an ISO rating, but does that translate, again, to the practical, rubber meets the road side? So I think finding that balance and doing it in a responsible way in a time when we've had COVID on top of this, not to use that as an excuse, but it is a reality. Yes, and I think we've gained a lot of ground in a lot of areas. We've taken a big step here for our police department. We're prepared to, and again, as I've said, if we need to dip into those reserves, that's why they are there. And so we've got enough meat on the bone that if we had to go there, we can go there, and I will support that. But again, then let's then set our goal, just like we want to increase in our fire department, we also want to get our reserves back to that, what's that break-even point? And there's disagreement on some of that. Again, I'd gone to some, the top teachers in the state to ask them, the professors, about that, and that's, and then balancing it with other cities. What are their goals? We're us, we're not them. So again, that's an arbitrary number. That's up to this council to make that decision. I was pushing for a policy. That's still not there, but I think the goal is there. I think everyone sees the value of those things. I want to work together, but the bottom line is we've got to do it in a way that's not going to keep taking the pound of flesh. And for me, that 4.2, whatever that it was, we had to set it at the higher amount, knowing we can't go higher than that. But that didn't mean I wanted to stay there. If we can bring that back for the sake of those who are paying those bills. I do think that this is a decent measure. It's showing our taxpayers we are listening to them as well, and not just, spending money recklessly. At the same time, there is need, and we do need to keep cognizant of that, and we do need to keep taking bites at that so that, we are supporting our safety for police and fire and move forward. So this year, I felt like, as we have in the past, we've focused on fire, we've taken some good steps, gotten our tower trucks, different things to begin to prepare, and tried to keep up with our staffing. And now I think this year, we've got to put a chunk towards our policing, or we're going to get way behind the 8 ball. And as Commissioner Smith said, that was my understanding, that we are adding those few positions as a step towards where we really want to be. And, to me, I think it's a sound way to do it. That's why I said I really think pulling back a little bit, giving back to our taxpayers who in just 6 years have gone from that 3.76 up to, that 4.2 mark. And that's what I've tried to, the whole time I've been here, what is that magic number? Is that going to keep going up and up and up? Then we're not doing it smart, we're not doing it sustainable. So finding those resources from other valid places without overloading that, I think it's a good way forward. And I'd love to see that be able to creep back down, but we can't right now because of all the challenges that we face. So our taxpayers have paid a bit more, as we all have. And as our staff and our workers, our police and fire, they've tightened that belt. And so we're trying to, that's just a tricky place to be, keeping the nose above water, but I do think we've made good progress. I think this is a good budget, and as long as I'm understanding correctly with what Commissioner Smith said, I think that's a good step to try and get there. And so, again, then Commissioner Becker's point, are we really trying to get there, or are we blowing smoke? So is that where we need to be? And again, I've asked you, why aren't we there? You talked about the Houston model, and that we have, it's like with the rover on the baseball team. When I was growing up, the softball team, you had the rover, and that person could fill in the gap. And so is that the best model, or is that a temporary model we've got I think, the greatest and finest department around, but that doesn't mean it can't be better. And so, again, I mean, trying to listen to the voices that are there and listen to the whole with reason, let's make positive steps. So I would love to see us go towards that goal. And let's get the infrastructure in place that we can sustain that.
Right.
So that from now on, they will be able to continue to be supported.
And you mentioned a key word there for me too. I kind of mentioned it a little bit last time, is infrastructure. You know, right now our stations are built to house those 4 people, outlying stations, 4 people. When we start rolling out these goals this year, I can safely add a district chief to a station and a 1 backwards firefighter to a station. Then next, as we start to see our growth come, we need to redo some of our stations. Our stations are older. You know, they're the same thing with the you know, just time and it goes on. Station 3, I would like to add some infrastructure there and then add that person, if that makes sense, or at the same time, so that it's a controlled type of movement that gets us in that positive direction. We all have the same goal. I know that.
And we also, Station 7, when does
Right.
that make sense to build Station 7? Because that will take pressure off Station 5 and get your response times in that Kelly Park Crossing
Sure.
interchange.
I can't wait to open Station 6 to relieve some of Station 1. That is the same models.
Yeah, I mean, I go back to, and someone can do public records on my email if they need to, but I don't know that I've ever received an email from a resident that has said, oh my gosh, the millage is just astronomically too high. I need relief. I've not received one, and I'm not exaggerating here. What I have received is that people want specific outcomes by living in Apopka. They want world-class facilities. They want world-class public safety. The staff want the same thing. They want a comfortable work environment, a safe work environment. People in Apopka want a beautiful city that they can be proud of. They want it to be aesthetically pleasing. They want recreational facilities that maybe are not here yet. They want, abandoned properties like the Apopka Little League fields to do something. Let's leverage that. They want these things. And again, we keep on nickel and diming over 1/10 of a mil on these millage rates. It's ridiculous. I mean, come on. I can confidently go to a tax-paying resident of this city and say, we've got the lowest tax rate in all of the surrounding area. And they're gonna say, big whoop. What can you show for it? And maybe I'm being too flip about this, but I don't think that I am. And so we talk about roofs being replaced, but are we able to fix the byproduct of those roofs leaking? Are there mold in some of our facilities? Are we attacking that? I see that we have AC repair, but how many? Does that complete all of them? Who knows? But I mean, all of this stuff needs to be done. It's not like we're being irresponsible with taxpayer dollars. So I just think it's not the right play for the responsible stewards of the taxpayer dollars that we are to keep. I think it's appropriate to keep it at the current millage rate. And I'll end my comments.
Okay, all right, why don't we have, I guess we got some public would like to speak, on the budget, so why don't we have some people come up? Maribel, you want to do? You want to go first? Absolutely.
We're thirsty, we're hungry.
Well, thanks for hanging in there with us.
Good evening, everyone.
Yes.
My name is Maribel Brinkle, and I am the Vice President of the museum. On behalf of the Apopka Historical Society, we are here to address the council and to request that the budget line for the museum for $120,000 be added back into the city proposed budget. At the budget meeting on July 20, a discussion occurred regarding that budget line for the museum between Commissioner Becker and Edward Bass, the city administrator. During that meeting, Commissioner Becker stated, and I quote, "I have been asking year over year for an economic development position, and we refuse to fund it." He also stated, expenditures like a museum expansion for $120,000, which ironically enough transport to that funding total, entre parentheses, for an economic development position, is coming out of left field for me, end quote. Mr. Bass responded by saying, and I quote, The 120,000 listed for the proposed improvements and expansions of the museum has been pulled from the latest iteration of the city's proposed budget, so that the final engineering, architectural, and construction costs can be determined. Then Mr. Bass went on to say, and I quote, "We have funding that's earmarked especially for that purpose, and they, us, the Historical Society, have funding that's earmarked for that purpose. So the dollars are already designated, already reserved, already restricted, and earmarked from prior years. And when I say prior years, I think it is as back as 12, 15 years ago, or even before that." End quote. These previous quotes were taken from the Apopka Chief newspaper, dated July 23rd, 2021. Now, I'm going to speak for the society. To us, this moment revealed the great strength of museums. Museums bring people of different backgrounds, experiences, and beliefs together. Museums as audience to enter a common space and explore a common interest. Museums create informal communities of learning, helping people recognize how much we share despite our differences, and how much those differences can help us grow. We have long believed the museum is the glue that holds the city together, mostly now that we are living in a divided moment. The museum reminds us of our shared history, heritage, and hopes for the future. At this point, we have a little PowerPoint presentation.
All right, you're gonna run out of time, but we got four, I guess, here, four with you that are,
It's gonna be a tiny one.
right, but I'm saying is, we'll work out the time.
Thank you. It just go, okay. Now, we have underrepresented areas, and we don't have enough space. This is why we need an expansion. Our areas that are underrepresented are not only in the walls of the museum, but are also in our community. We don't have room to displace the farm workers that contribute to this city, the Spanish that have contributed, the African American, the Asian communities. That's why we need the space. And also because we have plenty of items in our museums that are laying on boxes on the floors. We can trip and fall because there is no room to display what have been left to us to take care of. Let me go here. I'm going to have Justin Baker, he's our museum tech, to come and explain these numbers regarding our Google Analytica. Come on, Justin.
Hopefully I don't have this too close. Good evening. I know that our graphs are a little small, so I would like to express my apologies for that. But for example, one on the top right, it shows that the public viewing of the museum itself as a direct correlation of searching something having to do with the Apopka Museum or the Museum of the Apopkins sits just above 61,000 people are looking or seeing the link into our museum through Google. And that's not even including for the other 6% that look, or 60%, my apologies, for the correlation of museums near me or anything else searched on Google. Example 2, which is the middle diagram, explains that roughly about 300 actions within the quarter that we've had for June and August has a significant impact on our museum through calls, accessing the maps to be able to get to our museum. And this can be significantly increased due to the fact that we do seem to be coming out of a COVID pandemic as well. So I hope to see those numbers upped as well. And then for example 3, it shows the diagram of Central Florida and showing the areas that are targeted towards people wanting to come to the museum. Again, this is pretty much over all of Central Florida, and this is not even including the surrounding area. I do hope to see those numbers upped as well with this expansion and anything else that we decide to add for the museum. And so, that's it.
Thank you, Justin. Now, a drop in the bucket. Since we're talking about millions of dollars. The budget expenditure was set for the 2020 and 21 fiscal year to be at $52.4 million. I think that's the general fund. I think Ed say now is 56 or something. Being incorporated into the 2021 fiscal year, it is only accounts for 0.23% of the budget. In other words, just a quarter of a penny. $120,000 has always been a budget line allocation for the museum since our first curator and former Apopka Mayor John H. Land designated it. Now, this is what we have in the museum. This is the mess we're having because we had no more room to place anywhere. The reason we need expansion. The photo to the right displays the storage problem at the museum. So many of the artifacts that has been donated by the families of the people that started our city and the museum are not being displayed. We owe it to them in order to tell their story. Now, we hire these architect firms. They gave us this potential floor plan. To the back, the double doors on the bottom of the graphic are the front entrance to the museum. If you go to the back, we're planning to extend the museum about 15 foot of space with double doors and a big storage unit. Of course, by code, we had to add an extra bathroom to the museum. We're going to save a lot of money because we can go right out of the existing plumbing that already exists there. Okay, I think I'm good with that. Now, I would like to close this presentation by thanking the mayor and all city commissioners that are present. Rob, for the PowerPoint. We had a guest here. The Farmers Association was here. He had to leave, but he's very pleased that we want to represent them here in our museum. I also would like to recognize the president of the Historical Society, Francina Boykin, Historian of the Year, and a few honorary members, like Mrs. Betsy Thompson. She's a board member and a librarian to our museum. And of course, Trudy Weiss, they've been at the front of this for many, many years. Their family are the founders of what we're standing right now. The contributions are immense. I want to close by saying that our past, this is the motto of our society. Our past is our heritage, our present is our responsibility, and our future is our challenge. Thank you.
Thank you, Maribel.
Yeah, and just for a quick clarification, so in all fairness, those comments, I hope, didn't get misconstrued as my lack of support for the museum, because, you know, I've supported any funding as it relates to the museum in terms of upgrades to the property, things like that. My observation during that exchange that you referenced was it was called out in the budget presentation as its own kind of thing, and I've never seen a presentation like this before, and that's where I was calling out, this is interesting, $120,000 expenditure for a museum expansion, and to me, it just felt like it was the first time that I was seeing it. And that's why I made the comments the way that I did. Now, the exchange between Mr. Bass and I, clearly I lost the economic development position argument, but I never thought that it was taken out because Mr. Bass had referenced that line item was viewable, I think you said the CAFR, which you're gonna have to point me in the right direction because I didn't see it in there. And I don't see it where it's a line item for multiple budget years. So that's my oversight. If that's clearly there, someone just needs to point to it.
Okay.
But I didn't think that it was taken out of the budget, so I'll have to have Mr. Bass speak to that.
When somebody brought the article to me, we as a society felt that we needed to explain. The museum is not a club. The museum is actually hand in hand, married to the city. Without a museum and history in that museum, we really don't have a city. So actually, that budget is being there, that line and that money being allocated.
That's what someone needs to point to me to, because I haven't seen that, especially not called out the way that it was during the budget workshops. Just a miscommunication. Again, please don't let that say that I diminished any of the work being done by the Historical Society or the importance of the museum. I absolutely do.
Yes, okay, Mr. Becker, you need to pay a visit to our museum.
I have.
I have a few pamphlets that Justin, our technician, is going to pass to the city commissioners. It's a little
And I don't want
brochure.
people to think, again, I've been to our museum. I just don't want people thinking that I'm saying this and I've never been
Okay,
there
a
before.
revisit will do you good.
Edward, could you talk about the funding that we've got?
Is that including, I know you said a budget for it, but I know, Maribel, that over the years, there has been a lot of fundraising and donations. Where is that money?
Yeah, well, we're.
Let Edward talk about where the money, yeah.
So let me talk from the city side. I can talk on the city side. So in our CAFR, under where you have your fund balances, you have restricted balances, which we talked about earlier. The restricted balance from some of the monies that we received in our franchise agreement from Duke Energy was restricted for light purposes, which we're using 400,000 of that into this current budget for lighting improvements. This is that same type of item. So in the general fund balance reserves, there is a restricted dollar amount that was collected for the purpose of helping the expansion of the museum. And if I recall right, it was used, if you remember and it's so ironic we talk about this today because we had the proclamation today for the Harvey, right, and the book. There was lots of, so what happened was years ago when we started selling these books, the proceeds, the museum helped sell them, the city sold them as people came in. Those proceeds, back then, the city mayor land and the city council elected to make those proceeds, any proceeds come from those books, help go back to the museum, and it was to help them with future expansion. So that being said, there's about $21,000 that sits in the city's restricted reserve line that is restricted for that purpose. And then I can't speak for the museum because I have not seen their financials, but I know the museum has, my understanding is they have a building fund that they've collected over the years. And it was going to be kind of a match. We would give them our piece, they would have their piece. I know they've had some other events and collected some monies recently with their Festival of Trees, lots of money.
We had the Festival of Trees 2 years ago. We had a group that put together for the museum, and we raised, I want to say, $15,000 or $20,000 for the museum just in that one event. You know, we had a group of people from outside of the museum that came in, and 2 years ago, yeah.
So those are the dollars.
But at the end of the day, I mean, that 120 is still in the restricted section of that?
No, only the 21,000 is restricted from the city side. There's funding on their side. And one of the things is when we had the workshops, we had 120 in our initial budget that was put in for facilities for an improvement to the museum. But that, and the reason, and that dollar has since been removed from the budget, not because we don't think we should help with, and our 21,000 definitely needs to go to help with the renovation or help with the growth, expansion of the museum. However, we feel that should be done. But we took that funding piece out, and we have dollars in for the design piece because we need to have a design to figure out how we're going to expand it, which way, which direction, what's it going to cost? Because we don't even know that. We're not even the 120 number. We don't know if that's right. We don't know. That's just a number that was put in our budget. So I think we need to get that piece first so that we can determine, hey, we got 21, what does the museum have and willing to put up, and then we can make a decision on.
So even that, because it's similar to the property on Dream Lake that the Rotaries want to do, right? We carved out design dollars because obviously everything's not going to happen all at once. But again, are we saying that we do or we don't have the allocations for design for what the Historical Society is wanting to do for the museum.
We do have allocation for
Right.
design. We put money into design. We were hoping we could put money in and design all of those things that we
Right.
need. So we'll at least have the designs, and then we can go forward with what we want to do the construction.
Correct. So,
I want to add, the museum have many events to help with our growth. The city is growing, and people are coming to the museum, even through COVID. We got new members, we sell books, we're getting a new website. I am bringing the museum to the 21st century because that's what's required. Now, we are willing to pay for the architects and the engineer plans, and then the city can come along and help us with the addition to the museum, the actual walls. We're a partner. We don't have a huge budget. We're a nonprofit, but the museum belongs to all of us.
Thank you, Mayor Bell. Appreciate that.
Just a question that I have, how many capital campaigns have you done? Have you done fundraiser things other than like the trees? Are there things like that that you would, but you really kind of need the help to make that happen? The people who have that expertise? I'm thinking of the trust. I know that was one of the initial purposes of that, looking at, what's the other city? They raised like $20 million, I think, Mount Dora. They've been very successful. And to support things like this, I think there may be other things that we can really look at and do to help accent that out from the city, because I think there's a lot of people that believe in the museum. I love history.
Yes.
And you've done a tremendous job with a limited facility.
Exactly.
But I think maybe, I don't know, maybe sit down and talk with the board and talk about what could we do to bring someone in who can help run capital campaigns
That's correct.
and help raise some more resources.
Did you ever look into grants for the museum?
Yes.
Oh, you
but,
did?
we have looked into grants. The situation that we have now is that the expansion needed to be done 5 years ago. So we want a reality. We want to see something going. So our dollars are going to be spent on the engineer plans, architectural plans, and then present that to the city for the actual construction of the museum so that we can see something concrete.
Well, we're gonna do design for it.
Yeah, I was gonna
So
say, I
we're
wanna
gonna
make
take
sure
care
we
of that.
wasn't doing
You
the
don't need
same
to-
thing,
Okay.
because I thought he said that
we're
we were
doing
doing
that.
that
Yes.
already.
Well,
So
Ed
you don't
said
need to
we're
spend
gonna-
your money
Right, don't-
if we're spending ours.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
So the city is going to compromise themselves to help us with the design. They will pay for the design and the engineer. The
We'll
architectural
take care of
plans.
all that, just we get down to construction is where we need your help,
Okay,
okay?
all right.
Awesome.
Any other questions?
Well, I just want to say thank you because it's something that you and I have both spoken about. And it's about including other cultures that have been in our city and have helped grow our city. And you know that you have asked me about the farm workers and I've given you some direction of where you can go and get some of that history. So thank you, because even the farm workers have approached us, have approached me over the years. How can they be included in the history of Apopka? And so I'm super happy that you are taking that and you will
Well,
do what
thank
you
you.
can.
And the
Thank you.
museum doors are open.
I know.
And it's my hope that as we're doing the design, that there's communication, so make sure that what they're looking at planning is what is going to fit your needs.
Yes, I got his phone number.
All right.
All right. All right.
welcome.
Anybody else from the public want to speak? Okay, if not, close the public hearing, and I guess we're down to what do we want to do with the millage rate? And I guess I'll just start out as, I think, as we all have had either we or our businesses or our friends and their businesses, or a lot of people have suffered in the last 18 months due to COVID. And so I think when we look at our budget do we have a lot of our wants and needs in this budget? Absolutely. But I think we need to look at the taxpayer and say, you know what? We raised some fees. We're getting 8% more in taxes anyway. So just giving them that little sense of hope, that little tenth of a percent will go a long way toward making them feel better that, hey, we're in their camp. We feel what they're feeling. That, they lost that job for 6 months. They've had COVID and had to stay out of work for 2 weeks. I think that's what our constituents, our taxpayers deserve. They need a little help. I think they deserve it. I think 8% is still a great increase. I don't know how you argue that that's not a significant amount of additional dollars coming in. So, I hope I'll get somebody to make that motion that we reduce the millage by 0.10 and help our taxpayers who are paying the bills just a little bit of relief.
Yeah, I've gotten that response from different taxpayers, and I know we talked to different people. There are some who are at a place where, they're really in a good position. They'd like to see us go ahead and raise those taxes up. There's always going to be a variation across the board, but I've had from all economic parts of the spectrum also come to me and say, no, we really want you to keep the reins on that. Otherwise, where will it stop? Are we making those steps? And I don't think it may seem insignificant in one sense, but a lot of insignificant steps have equaled significance. And even with doing that, it's still above the rollback rate. So we are increasing those taxes in fact, even with pulling that back just a little bit. And the other side I always remember is we're not the only source that taxes each person. We're one of many. And so when you take all of the sources, thank God we don't live in California where $3 per gallon is all in taxes. I just try and keep those things in mind. And for myself, I think it's a sound move forward. I think we've taken some solid steps. And I think that does speak to our taxpayers as we've tried to also speak to our staff. We want to have them to have the increases and have that 6% to be able to bring merit raises. So I think as we do that across the board, it's the most balanced way to approach it. So I'm definitely willing myself to make a motion to accept that budget at that rate.
Well, I just want to add this, that we have been selling some property, and I'd like to see that we continue to put out city assets, such as the properties that we own, that we be able to bid them, put them out to bid, and whatever revenues we get from that gets put into the general budget. That's how I feel about our city assets.
Budget or reserves?
The reserves.
Okay.
No, well, wait a minute. When we sell a property, where does the funding go for that?
It depends on which fund that the property is in, and then whatever fund the property's in, those dollars go credited into the reserves of that fund, and then you can allocate those dollars from the reserves.
And I know you also said that when we sit down with the CARES Act, we'll be able to kind of redirect some of the budget that we have put toward a budget. Can we remove something that we budgeted and use the CARES Act money? That's something I need to know.
Commissioner, I can check on that. I don't know. I don't know that answer. I can look and get that answer for you. So,
Right.
So you're basically saying if something's already budgeted and earmarked and approved, can you come back now and use that CARES money to fund that and
Right.
put that money somewhere else? I will check on that and let you know.
Okay.
And like I said, that's confusing, but I want to have all that information together because I want you to see everything, how it can be used. There are some very interesting things in how these dollars can be used, and I don't want us to leave anything on the table. If there's by chance a place where we can use these dollars for some of these things we've talked about,
Right, and
that'd be
that's-
great. But we're hearing that a lot of it is so restricted, it has to be for specific things. And so I just want to make sure that we do that correctly so that, as we're audited by the feds, because, this will be audited every year in our audit, and it'll have to be checked to those numbers. And so I just want to make sure, granted, we're just getting off the ground with it. There'll be another round that'll come, but we'd need to have the workshop, understand everything, earmark what we do have, and then the future dollars that are coming, we'll know exactly where to put those as well.
But one of the things we want to try to do, and Edward and I've talked about, if you look at the application we did for Camp Weewa, it was literally 200 pages, and it took a whole team to put that application together. So all I'm gonna ask you, and that's not for me, it's for Vladimir and for Edward, is that we try to make it 2 or 3 big projects.
Yeah.
So we have less reporting, accounting, auditing, versus if we try to spread it out on $50,000, $100,000 expenditures, they could spend their whole time trying to make sure they're meeting the federal, guidelines for the money. So that's my only question is to the CARES money is that
Yeah,
we.
but the CARES money, you're going to have it separate so that.
Yes.
Just like we do with Camp Weewa right now.
Correct.
We're going
Yes.
to we have to do the same for the CARES package. Just the same way we did with the Duke money, which is separate, so that we have a running of what we're spending and earmarking for it.
Correct.
Am I correct?
Yes, correct, we're doing that. We're going even a little higher than we are on the Duke money because this has more restrictions than that Duke money had. What we're doing with the Rescue Act money is, and you'll see it in your budget, it all went into the grant fund. So it's in the reserves in the grant fund so that we don't mix those dollars. And then what we'll do is, we've taken $1 million already that we've put to resurfacing, it was a big issue, a big thing. So now when we come back and show you, here's all the restrictions, here's what's left over, they'll be able to account for every dollar that has come out of those funds for you. So you'll be able to see. So, and keep in mind, if a lot of times too, what you can do is that rescue dollar might fund a project, a future project that we had, or a project that, that we're putting some general fund dollars to, we're putting some other grant monies to, we're putting impact monies to, that we're trying to fund. This may be able to help that and then relieve some of those reserves or funding in, for example, say the general fund. If there's something that can be used for in the general fund, then it can free up some of the current projects, like you've said. We'll fund a project that we need to fund, but instead of having to fund that with future revenues, we can use those future revenues for other budget items in the general fund. The problem you have is the rescue money, it was so restrictive, it almost labeled a lot of the usage as an enterprise fund, for your enterprise funds, water, sewer, broadband. It was things that, and then things that COVID things that were affected. So it's very strict. It's not just a free, here's $3.5 million, you can use it wherever you want to use it. We have to make sure that we use it correctly. And so that when we bring that back, you'll be able to see those dollars, and then we'll be able to appropriate those, wherever that, based on that criteria.
Okay.
Commissioner Smith?
Well, I'm gonna tell you. I was in favor of leaving the millage rate where it was. But if I heard Mr. Bass correctly, that we're looking at the impact fees, that rate increase, which will bring some additional dollars to the city. And that if we don't receive the grants, we're still going to get the police officers and our firefighters, then I would be in agreement with the 10% reduction.
Okay. Commissioner Becker?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to put it in the right lens too. I mean, property taxes out of our general fund make up 28%, 29% of that overall revenue contribution. So, when we talk about, property taxes being the end-all be-all, it's not. 72% comes from other funding sources. So what we control is that property tax. And if the rest of that revenue is volatile in nature, what we're doing is protecting a revenue stream that's going to critical need within our city. Based off of the workshops that we had, based off of hearing from the director level staffs as well as their staff, I don't think that reducing it, I think keeping it at 4.2876, keeping it at the same rate. Now we can talk about that's a tax increase over the rollback rate, but there's no way we should be considering having a revenue year over year the same when we know well that expenses have gone up. And then the point that you just made even kind of validates my point of view that some of the funds that we're thinking that we can use may be more restrictive in nature than we thought. And with all the encumbrances that we're talking about with potential earmarks out of the general fund, because we think that we're flush with it, if the WeWa stuff doesn't come to fruition, if the grants don't come to fruition, everybody's going to be knocking on the general fund door or the reserve door. And we've got to protect on a contingency basis. And that's why I feel like we keep it at 4.28 is fiscally responsible. That's my point of view.
Okay. All right, I'll look for a motion to adopt the tentative millage rate of 4.1876, which is a 2.57% increase over the rollback rate of 4.085.
So moved.
Got a motion by Commissioner Bankson.
I second it.
Second by Commissioner Smith. All those in favor? Aye.
I think you should do the roll call. I'm gonna, because I feel like with the rolling back the 1/10, which is $400,000, I know you tried to explain that to me. I just feel we're just gonna kind of stay the same, and I know that we've put in much more. It's just,
So is that a yes or a no?
I would agree if we didn't have as many advances as we did make in many areas, but we really did make a lot, just maybe for food for thought for you. Had we not done that, then I think we would be staying the same, but we really did do a lot to beef up and strengthen in a difficult time. When we get beyond that, I think we're really going to be able to sail and move forward, so.
you see, but then
that-
for next year's budget, we're gonna
We're
find
just- we're down to
ourselves
the-
in the same
No, we're down to the vote.
situation.
We've already gone.
I know,
So
so
we got 3 yeses. Commissioner Velasquez?
I'm going to vote for it because,
Okay, so we got 4 yeses. Commissioner Becker? No. Okay, so we got 4 yeses and 1 no. Okay. In accordance with the truth and millage trim requirements, the city must set the tentative millage rate and devise the property appraiser of the tentative millage rate, rolled back rate, date, time, and place of final budget hearing. The tentative millage rate is 4.1876, which represents a 2.57% increase over the rolled back rate of 4.0825. The final budget hearing is scheduled for Wednesday, September the 15th, 2021 at 6 p.m. in the council chambers. And with that,
Mayor, Mayor, you need to,
We have to adopt the budget.
we need to adopt the budget, the proposed
oh,
budget.
yes.
So we need to adopt it. So you've set the millage and you set the hearing, the final hearing, so now you just need to adopt the proposed budget.
Motion to adopt the proposed budget.
So moved.
that's
Got a motion by Commissioner Smith,
second.
second by Commissioner Velasquez. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries 4-1. Okay, with that, we are good to go. Thank you.